Imagine a day where you can simulate a world so perfectly that you can recreate every single neurosynaptic thought you could have, but now you're in the simulation on the computer.
Is reality all just one big simulation? Well, some big names like Neil deGrasse Tyson, Elon Musk, and many more think it's a very possible that we are. So let's get into it. Neil deGrasse Tyson, one of the most charismatic scientists since Bill Nye. He thinks that there's a very good chance we could be living in a simulation. In fact, he thinks it's about a 50-50 chance. All of this could be one big simulation sitting on someone's hard drive. When Tyson was asked about us possibly living in a simulation of some kind, he said, quote, "I think the likelihood may be very high." Then he noted the massive gap between human and chimpanzee intelligence despite how much DNA we share with each other. 98%, just so you know. So in the vastness of space, there could be some other beings far, far more superior to us in every conceivable way. Tyson went on to say we would be drooling, blithering idiots in their presence. If that's the case, it is easy for me to imagine that everything in our lives is just a creation of some other entity for their entertainment. A lot of the popularity about the whole "are we living in a simulation" thing came not only from The Matrix, of course, but from Nick Bostrom, a philosopher at the University of Oxford in 2003. He came out with a theory that what we perceive as reality might actually be a sophisticated computer simulation created by an advanced civilization. He based his theory on three possibilities, one of which must be true. Either human civilizations never reach a stage where they can create such simulations because they either go extinct or choose not to. Advanced civilizations are not interested in creating simulations of their ancestors' lives. And the third is that we are almost certainly living in a simulation. See, Bostrom argues that if the first two options are not true, then the third must be. Because if any advanced civilizations are capable of creating simulations and are interested in doing so, the number of simulated realities would far outnumber the one originally created. So the probability that we are living in the real world is very low. To make it simpler, think about it like this. Let's say you have one real world and millions of simulated ones. If you randomly found yourself in one of these worlds, the chances are incredibly high that you're in one of the simulations rather than the one real world. People often liken this idea to video games. Just as characters in a game might believe their world is real, Bostrom suggests that our reality could be created by beings with technology far beyond our own, and we wouldn't necessarily know it. Next up, we have Elon Musk. A man so incredibly smart, yet so incredibly dumb at the same time. It's weird. Anyway, we're not here to talk about Elon Musk himself really, but his theory on a simulated world. Let's get into that. The CEO of SpaceX and Tesla himself really believes that we are indeed living in a simulation. He's talked about this on the Joe Rogan podcast and press conferences, and unlike the other folks on this list who just theorize about it and think it could be a possibility, Musk is like 99.9% sure, stating that there's a quote 1 in a billion chance we're in base reality. So just a little less on the fence than Neil deGrasse Tyson, for example. Max Tegmark is a physicist at MIT who's written a couple papers on simulation theory, one in 2014 entitled "Is the Universe a Simulation?" and another that came out just a couple years ago called "Detecting Structures in Universe Simulations," which he wrote along with postdoctoral researcher at the University of Copenhagen, Hans Olaf Kold. Max Tegmark believes that our universe can all be broken down mathematically, and that even reality itself is part of a mathematical structure. Now, he outlined this in his 2014 book, Our Mathematical Universe. So Tegmark thinks that these mathematical structures could essentially be similar to the type of code we see used in, say, video games. A simulation. In Tegmark's own words, if I were a character in a computer game, I would also discover eventually that the rules seemed completely rigid and mathematical. Next up, we have James Gates, who spoke at the Isaac Asimov Memorial Debate along with Max Tegmark, Neil deGrasse Tyson, and others. Gates is a theoretical physicist at the University of Maryland, and he made similar discoveries as Max Tegmark did. He stated, "I was driven to error-correcting codes. They're what make browsers work." So why were they in the equations I was studying about quarks and electrons and supersymmetry? This brought me to the stark realization that I could no longer say people like Max are crazy. So if the universe we're living in is really as expansive as it appears to be, why do we seem to be alone? Now, this is assuming, of course, you don't believe we've already made contact with aliens. I can go either way on this. I find some of the stories pretty convincing, but I've never actually seen a UFO or an alien myself. For the purpose of this point, let's just say the government is not keeping aliens hidden away in some underground lab somewhere. So if not, then where the hell are they? For all the transmissions and probes we've sent out into space, you'd think we'd have made some form of contact by now. All your friends are just other humans. I don't know if you've noticed, unless you're pets, you got pets, maybe those could be your friends, but yeah, I mean, there's no Klingons or Wookiees anywhere to be seen. So the point is, maybe we haven't made contact with anything because space really isn't as massive as it appears to be. Nothing is, because none of this is really here. It's just a highly advanced simulation with only enough RAM to render one advanced civilization at a time. Or maybe everything we see is technically here, but it's all been artificially created by some advanced being that we have no way of contacting.
It is possible that a team of scientists conducted an experiment that found proof that we are living in a simulated universe. Back in 2017, these scientists at the University of Washington totally shook up the scientific world when they proved that they could sneak computer code into real human DNA. If you're like me, you're probably wondering why on earth they would need to ever do that, and the answer is to expose a vulnerability in gene sequencing computers. But by showing that our biological building blocks could be hacked, just like computer code, they may have accidentally opened up Pandora's box. By showing that our DNA can be hacked like a computer code, they may have shown something that is straight out of the Matrix. Maybe what we thought was our biological reality is actually just zeros. It's basically like finding out that we're living in a super advanced simulation where DNA isn't just the stuff of life, it's the stuff of code.
Next up, we have the climate simulation theory. So some have speculated that our world might actually be a giant simulation in order to test out how to deal with a global crisis like climate change, for example. First, there's the idea that our civilization is headed towards big trouble because of climate change. We're messing with the environment with all, the pollution and stuff. And if we keep going like this, it could lead to some serious problems like floods, droughts, and all sorts of other bad stuff. Now, some folks think that maybe all this chaos is happening because we're actually part of a simulation, that maybe some super advanced beings created our world as a simulation to see how we deal with a big energy crisis or world-ending issue. I mean, it would make sense if we had the ability ourselves to create a virtual world within a computer to test out how to deal with various problems. We totally would. So maybe that's exactly what's happening right now, and we just don't know it.
What if a teeny tiny little measurement is what breaks the simulation? Enter the Planck length. This super small measurement is like the Lego brick of the universe. At this small of a scale, even our own physics, like the concepts of gravity and space-time, aren't really quite sure what to do, and the rules no longer apply. This is exactly what has simulation enthusiasts wondering, could this little measurement be the simulation's way of showing that it is in fact just that? A simulation. Each Planck length is a single pixel, one bit of information. Could this be the blueprints to the Matrix?
How do you explain all the unexplained things people have been claiming to experience since pretty much the dawn of time? That's a bizarre sentence. Doors slamming on their own, phantom footsteps, apparitions. Well, people will either say it was a ghost, and then non-believers scoff. But they don't really have much of an explanation of their own other than some form of your brain was playing some sort of trick on you. Is that really the best explanation that we can come up with, though? That we're just hearing or seeing things that aren't really there? Maybe there's a meatier explanation, something with a little more substance. Maybe paranormal experiences are actually glitches in the Matrix. Those translucent figures people have seen in old buildings wearing old Victorian era clothing could be the computer just glitching, showing a brief flash of something that's already happened. Same thing with the phantom sounds like footsteps or laughter or fart. Why do we never hear ghost farts? You know what I mean? It's always footsteps, laughter, creepy stuff, but it's never anything funny.
Next, I'm gonna hit you with a bit of an Uno reverse here. Nuclear physicist Zoré Davudi serves up a mind-bending idea. Cosmic rays, those cosmic cannonballs of energy, could hold the key to unlocking the truth behind the simulation theory. In a simulated universe, these rays might look like chunky pixels on an old school video game screen, while in the real deal, they'd stretch out like never-ending spaghetti strands. But here's the real kicker. Even if we found these pixelated particles, there's no guarantee we're not just caught up in some super advanced version of The Sims. What I mean by this is summed up perfectly by NYU philosopher David Chalmer. Quote, "You're not going to get proof that we're not in a simulation because any evidence that we get could be simulated. Proving we're not in a simulation is like trying to catch fog with a net. Any evidence we could dig up could be part of the simulation itself, leaving us scratching our heads. So next time you feel like reality's playing tricks on you, just remember, it might be because we're all just pixels in someone else's reality."
Alright, this next one is pretty trippy. It has to do with some bizarre behavior seen in electrons. There's a famous physics experiment called the double slit experiment. Scientists shoot tiny particles, electrons, through two slits in a barrier, and the expectation is that you'll see this wave-like pattern on a screen behind it. But when scientists actually watch as these electrons go through the slits, suddenly the pattern on the screen changes. It's not wave-like anymore. The electrons end up behaving more like particles. So why does this happen? We're still not sure, but some people cite this as possible evidence that we might be living in a simulation. Maybe the so-called program running our simulated world conserves resources and only shows us certain things when we're actually paying attention to them. What we're looking at here is a photo of one of the Belmez faces. What are the Belmez faces, you ask? The story begins in 1971 in a little Spanish town called Belmez. A woman named Maria Gomez Camara looks down at her kitchen floor and swears that she sees a human face forming in the concrete. Not like a stain or a crack that kind of resembles something, an actual detailed face. Her husband and son freaked out, smashed the thing with a pickaxe, poured new concrete, but within days, another face appeared. Word spread, and the mayor himself told the family not to destroy this new one. Instead, chunks of the floor were cut out and taken away to be studied. Meanwhile, people started flocking to this house, which became known as the House of the Faces. And the faces didn't stop. Over the years, new ones popped up. Men and women, young and old. Some even seemed to change slightly over time, like they were alive in the concrete. Paranormal investigators floated the idea that it was thoughtography. Basically that Maria's house or her subconscious was somehow imprinting these faces from the spirit world onto the floor. Skeptics have tested samples and come back with theories about paint or chemicals, but in 2014, a forensic team tried to recreate the phenomenon, but they couldn't pull it off. Their conclusion? Inconclusive. To this day, these faces are still a mystery. This image was shared by Reddit user OKTwist3079. Doesn't look to be anything odd in this image at first glance. We got 3 cute dogs in Christmas outfits playing in the snow, but the Redditor only has 2 dogs. OKTwist writes, "I took this photo of my 2 dogs. So please explain how there are 3 dogs in the photo. No one was visiting and I have no idea how to use Photoshop. My mother-in-law is freaking out and I have no explanation. The fact that they're all wearing the same outfit and all in different positions, I'm just losing it. How?" Now, obviously, this isn't double exposure. This was snapped on an Android phone. I'm no expert on camera glitches, but doesn't really look like one to me. Doesn't seem to be any interference in the image. Again, if you didn't have the context, you'd think this was a totally normal photo. Any ideas, folks? Genuine curiosity or hoax? Share your thoughts down below. What you're looking at here is photographic evidence of one of the most mysterious and well-documented UFO events in history. It started on the night of July 19th, 1952. Air traffic controllers at Washington National Airport picked up 7 unidentified objects on radar. Controllers said the blips looked solid, like actual aircraft. At the same time, pilots in the air were reporting strange lights moving above them. One pilot described them as glowing balls that shot across the sky faster than any jet could follow. Then radar radar at Andrews Air Force Base, just outside DC, confirmed the exact same objects. One point controllers said the UFOs were hovering over the White House and Capitol building. Fighter jets were scrambled, but whenever they got close, the objects just vanished. As soon as the jets left, the UFOs came back. That little cat and mouse game happened over and over, not just that night, but again a week later on July 26th. The press went wild. Headlines in major papers screamed saucers swarm over Capitol. It got so insane that President Truman personally asked for a briefing. The Air Force didn't really have an explanation, but they just said, well, it's temperature inversion, basically a rare weather condition that can cause issues for radar, but that of course doesn't explain the pilots who saw lights with their own eyes. Well, this car's clearly totaled. Whoever was in that car must have been pancaked to death, right? Wrong. On a November evening in 1988, Rose Benvenuto swerved to avoid hitting a stray dog in upstate New York, resulting in this brutal crash. Most people would have been killed, but somehow, remarkably, Rose walked away with barely a scratch. That's when things got even stranger, because a firefighter named Sharon Boo took pictures of the wrecked car, and in one of her shots, the one we're looking at again here, there's clearly this glowing, transparent figure hovering by the vehicle. The figure is ghost-like, you can see through it, but it's clearly there in the image. And the figure showed up not only in that print, but also on the negative, so it wasn't a development trick or double exposure. Both Rose and Sharon went on to label the figure a guardian angel, maybe the very being that saved Rose's life. Reddit user Naku Pendwa posted this image. My dad got me these when I was a youngish teenager from a trip they went on to Las Vegas, they write. I've only ever had this one set. It was spilled in the drawer, so I started putting them back in and ... And yeah, this is pretty strange. Obviously, stuff like this can easily be faked, but let's just say this Reddit user did happen to experience this. I'd be pretty unsettled. I mean, there are only 6 spaces in that container for 6 dice. Unless someone snuck an extra one in there as a prank, I don't have a solid explanation for this. Is this bus driving back from a Taylor Swift concert? Whoever was running the simulation when this image was taken just forgot to attend the diversity and inclusion seminar that morning. Or they just got lazy and decided to hit copy and paste and call it a day. Or I don't know, maybe they're all related. Or they could be one of those female friend groups that are all just blonde ladies, like with barely any discernible physical differences. Someone described them as maybe basic, drink a lot of Starbucks, their fiance's names are Brad, they talk about Jesus a lot, you know the crowd. I've never actually hung out with people like this, but you know, am I reading too much into it? Probably. But am I probably right? Probably. So this is nuts. Are they doppelgangers? I mean, not only do they look very similar in size, shape, and face, but their clothes match, they have the same backpacks, their drinks are the same, for God's sakes. It seems too uncanny to be a coincidence. So there's a good chance they're also twins. If that's the case, then this is just hilarious. You don't really see adult twins dressing the exact same clothes, buying the same knapsacks and beverages, unless it's a cartoon, or possibly, in this case, a simulation. Back in October, people near Grissom Joint Air Reserve Base in Indiana got a front row seat to something strange in the sky. Multiple glowing orange orbs, at least 6, were seen darting around, hovering, flickering, and then just disappearing. Witnesses were pretty freaked out. It wasn't just what people saw with their eyes either. One observer checked their Doppler radar and noticed a massive rectangular shape with a vapor shockwave trailing behind it. That's basically a trail that happens when something moves insanely fast through the air. The shape was estimated to be about 20 miles long. Naturally, skeptics chimed in. Alejandro Rojas from Enigma Labs said it might just be military flares, pointing to the way the lights lit up and faded in a row, but that doesn't explain everything, especially since this wasn't an isolated incident. Similar UFO sightings popped up near other military bases, like in Virginia just months earlier. What you're looking at here are burns on a woman's hands, and this is a newspaper clipping of the same woman's hair starting to fall out in clumps. These unsettling images are photographic evidence of the Cash Landrum incident. On the night of December 29th, 1980, 3 people in Texas had a disturbing encounter with a UFO. Betty Cash, Vicki Landrum, and Vicki's grandson Colby were driving home when they noticed this massive diamond-shaped object hovering over the trees. It was throwing off flames, extreme heat. At first, Vicki thought that this was a religious sign, something like the Second Coming. She told Betty to stop the car, but once they got out, the heat was just unbearable. The thing was so hot that when Betty touched the car, her hand burned and Vicky's handprint got seared into the dashboard. As the object suddenly started climbing back into the sky, a swarm of military helicopters appeared and surrounded it. But the aftermath is what really pushes this story into the disturbing territory. That night, all three of them started to feel sick. Betty ended up with blisters, her hair started falling out, and later she was diagnosed with cancer. Vicky developed a cataract. Their symptoms seemed to line up eerily well with radiation exposure. They eventually sued the US government for $20 million, pointing to those helicopters as proof that the military knew more than they were letting on, but the case was dismissed. To this day, no one can fully explain what they ran into on that empty Texas road. This is one of the most famous images ever taken of a mysterious phenomenon over the skies of Norway. In the Hasdalen Valley of Norway, people keep reporting these strange glowing lights that just can't be explained. They'll show up in the middle of the night or sometimes during the day, sometimes floating for over an hour, other times flashing across the sky in just seconds. They don't always look the same either. Sometimes they're white, sometimes red or yellow, and they'll drift slowly or dart around. Scientists have tried to explain them as some kind of natural plasma caused by the metals in the hills reacting with the environment, but that doesn't match every sighting. The movements are just too strange. That's why Hasdalen is still considered one of the most active UFO hotspots in the world.
You know the classic children's tale of Goldilocks, where she's always looking for the thing that's not too hot, not too cold, but just right? I swear I'm not going crazy. This is just the best way to describe the position of our planet Earth. Scientists have dubbed our place in the universe as the Goldilocks zone, where we are the perfect distance away from our sun so that it's not too hot where humans wouldn't be able to live, and it's not too cold where all our water is frozen, and so are we. Here's where the simulation twist comes in. How likely is it that we were placed here just because we had a stroke of good luck? If you were designing a reality, you would of course want to put your characters in a place where they are the most likely to survive. That doesn't mean that you still don't do crazy stuff like take the ladder out of the pool or conveniently forget to put doors in the house, but it's just a way to give the characters a baseline to thrive.
Here's a bit of a different take on this whole thing, but still very valid. Our perception of reality is just flawed. In a way, we're all kind of living in our own little simulations, interpreting all the information that's thrown at us with our own flawed human senses and emotions. We all kind of live in our own world, don't we? Our perception of reality is based on our past memories and experiences, our upbringing, our own personal abilities to interpret information. It's based on all kinds of things, and sometimes our perception ends up lining up with other people's, but in all kinds of other ways it doesn't. Just ask your ex who said what to who. This is why eyewitness testimony is often one of the least credible types of evidence in court, and even when it comes to stuff that's right in front of us, we never really all agree. Remember the dress that was clearly white and gold? Actually, did you think it was white and gold or blue and black?
It's blue and black.
Blue? Really?
Yeah.
Oh my god. Chris? Damn, alright, so I'm the only one in the room, damn. Alright, I thought it was white and gold. That's what I think. For some reason though, other people say blue and black. In reality though, it's pretty much split down the middle. If you ask most people, it'll be pretty 50-50, and that's kinda nuts. So if something as simple as a photograph like that can be this like divisive, not hard to imagine why it's so tough to wrap our heads around reality itself.
Also, that will be James' last video. I will not have any white and gold truthers over here. Imagine a team of scientists that come together with powerful computers and a ton of curiosity, and they all start to recreate the entire universe, but in digital form. Well, that actually happened in 2014. The brilliant people at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics pulled off a mind-bending feat when they linked up 8,000 computers to create a huge simulation of our universe that stretched 350 million light years across. They didn't stop here, but they ended up hitting fast forward and aging the universe 13 billion years, I guess, just to see what awaits us. They could basically see the entire universe from the Big Bang to the present day all on a computer screen. This all goes to show that not only are we interested in creating simulations, but we're also pretty good at them, and we're only getting better. And if we can create our own simulations, what's to say that we aren't living in a super advanced civilization's simulation? And hey, if you need further proof that we're suckers for simulations, just look at the wildly popular video game franchise The Sims. With over 125 million copies sold in its first decade alone, it's clear that we humans have a knack for playing with virtual worlds. So, when you think about it, if future generations of humanity have the chops to whip up even more realistic simulations, it wouldn't be a shocker if they decided to dive headfirst into the digital sandbox of existence. Who knows? Maybe we're just characters in someone else's video game. Cue the existential crisis.
So we've discussed a lot of theories and stuff from scientists, but how about strange first-hand experiences? This story comes to us from Reddit user JenL729. When I was about 4 or 5 years old, my father's uncle passed away. My father was going to the wake, but my mother was working, so he needed to bring me with him. I had never been to a wake or a funeral before, and I do believe this was my first ever experience with death. We arrived at the funeral home and I followed him through the procession of family members. Then we approached the open casket. I don't recall being afraid. Curious and bewildered would be better terms to describe the feelings, I think. I do know that there was absolutely no sense of fear at that point. We stepped away from the casket and I stood by my father as he chatted with family members. I needed to use the restroom, and it was just around the corner, so he told me to go and come right back. I turned to the corner, used the restroom/sink, then exited the bathroom. When I came out and turned the corner, the room was empty and there was no casket. My father was gone, and so were all the other people that were there only a moment ago. I fearfully began wandering around the funeral home, but not a person could be found. The entire building was silent and empty. Finally, as I neared the front entrance of the building and was going to step outside, an employee approached me from the alcove on the right where they kept the coats to see if I was okay. I don't remember any of the conversation, but they turned me around and directed me back to the bathroom. When I came out of the bathroom, everything had returned to normal. Now, that person was very young. It's a very old memory they had, so finicky, but interesting story. So, is there any way to actually test whether or not we're living in a simulation? Well, not at the moment, but there are a team of scientists led by Martin Savage that have been working on it, and he believes that one day computers will be advanced enough to determine it. Martin Savage and his team had been attempting to actually simulate a universe inside a computer. Now, that hasn't been accomplished yet, but it could be a possibility in the future. Martin J. Savage is a physics professor at the University of Washington who thinks our universe might be a giant computer simulation run by our ancestors. He and his colleagues started looking for specific patterns in the universe that also appear in smaller computer simulations we create today. One pattern he used as an example is the limitations in the energy of cosmic rays. If our universe were a simulation, these cosmic rays might not behave as expected because of the resource constraints of whatever's running the simulation. That one's hard to wrap your head around. But his next glitch in the Matrix story comes to us from Reddit user JBBJ84 and goes as follows. The one thing that has continued to make me question my reality is a dream I had back in 8th grade about my girlfriend who was going to break up with me. I dreamt that she was sitting in a room with her best friend discussing whether she would break up with me or not. I distinctly remember the point she made about being too young and whatever. It was a long time ago, but I do remember that after waking up from that dream, the reasons she had for breaking up with me were ingrained in my brain. For some reason, when I woke up after this dream, I had a weird feeling that I was gonna receive some bad news. Lo and behold, I checked my phone and there's a massive text message from my then girlfriend explaining why we should break up, with the exact same reasoning as I witnessed in the dream I had. Even weirder is that I found out the friend I had seen in my dream was actually with my ex when she sent the message. It was the weirdest effing thing I've ever experienced. It was completely out of the blue, and I didn't expect the breakup text at all before the dream. Now, after I've read about simulation theory, the thought can't stop popping into my mind that somehow I was able to visualize the next part of this game tree, that I unexpectedly was able to view what was going to happen next. It still bugs me today and gives me existential anxiety because I still don't have a plausible explanation as to why I had such a specific dream that actually ended up coming true. David Chalmers is a well-known philosopher who focuses on the nature of consciousness, looking into why and how physical processes in the brain give us the feeling of being conscious. Chalmers is also interested in the idea that we might be living in a computer simulation. Now, Chalmers really makes the whole simulation thing seem less scary than it sounds. He has a much more chill view on it in general. One of Chalmers' key points is that if we are living in a simulation, it wouldn't necessarily change our everyday experiences or the fact that we have minds and are conscious. He thinks that even if our world is just some sophisticated simulation, it would still be real to us. Our feelings, thoughts, experiences, it'd still be genuine, even if the actual reality is different from what we see it as. So he looks at more the philosophical side rather than the scientific details. He's interested in how a scenario like this would impact our understanding of reality and consciousness. Finally though, we have a story again from Reddit user RespectRemarkable294 with a post entitled, "I was never there before." She writes, "I had never in my life been to Universal, but when I was planning our dual vacation at Disney and Universal, my kids kept asking me what rides were at Disney because I had been there before, and I told them every single ride and every detail that I could remember. The Mummy, Men in Black, The Simpsons, you get the picture, only to realize not one of them are at Disney rides. My explanation, well, maybe Disney used to own them. I know, stupid, but whatever gets me through the day. We go on our trip and go to Men in Black, and we're waiting in line, and I tell my husband everything that's gonna happen right before it's happening. It's like I remembered a script. Same thing is happening on all the other rides. However, it doesn't happen on the newer ones, like Harry Potter rides, etc. I called my mom and asked her again if we'd ever been there when we were young, and again she told me no. I am 38 years old. I would have definitely remembered, but I keep asking. It just feels wrong, and I feel like I'm being lied to. I also know for a fact that I never have been to Universal, and I've never been on these rides prior. I never watched videos either. I hate having rides ruined with them. Of course, all this simulation stuff is impossible to really test or prove, right? At least at this stage. So it's just something that's interesting to ponder. Plus, if we really are in a simulation, the rules of our universe are probably completely controlled by the creators of whatever this simulation is. So it'd be pretty tricky to find definitive evidence or glitches in the system. Hey, until we find out, let's just, I don't know, keep enjoying it as best as we can.
In our number 10 spot, we have the same shirt. In this instance, a man was out at a restaurant and was about to eat a meal when he discovered something weird. The man seated behind him had the same shirt as him. But if you think that's funny and a bit strange, imagine a third man seated in the seat behind the second guy, and he had the same shirt on too. What are the odds that 3 people with the same shirt would be seated in 3 consecutive tables, one after the other, in the same place? Definitely a glitch in the universe. In our number 9 spot, we have Time Warp. This is a story told by a Reddit user who took the same route to get to work every single day. This route would be 45 minutes there and 45 minutes back. With traffic, it was a bit more. So, anyways, it of course blew his mind when one day he went the same route to work and got there in 30 minutes, which he says is impossible. He checked his phone and sure enough, he saw a text from 30 minutes prior about leaving the house. Till this day, he is convinced that somehow he went through a glitch in the Matrix. This actually has happened to me before, but it was as if I was sleeping on my drive home, as I don't remember getting from one place to the other. Maybe it's best I just don't drive. In our number 8 spot, we have the triple van. If you thought the same t-shirt was weird, then what about the same red van that's the same make, year, and model, all in a lineup, one after the other at a toll booth? Mind blown. If that is not a glitch in the universe, then I don't know what is. Unless they are all besties who have the same things and decided to get the same cars, this is truly wild. What do you think? Is this proof that we probably live in a simulation? Let me know in the comment section below. In our number 7 spot, we have couple swap. I love this one as it is truly very, very strange. In this photo, you see 2 couples at the same restaurant and they appear to be wearing the opposite of each other, but they look look quite similar. The man on one side is wearing pink and the man on the other side is wearing green. The woman on one side is wearing pink and the woman on the other side is wearing green. They are the exact same shades of these two colors, and what makes this picture even weirder is that the men both have white hair and the women both have black hair. If you were to put a mirror between them, it would almost be like they are from different opposite dimensions. In our number 6 spot, we have the 3 blondes. Another photo that I'm sure is proof that we are living in the Matrix, y'all. This is a photo of 3 women on a bus that have the same 80s blonde blowout, are wearing black leather jackets and blue jeans. Also, they are all seemingly sitting the same. Whoa, this is wild to me. I hope someone on the bus pointed this out to them so they could all meet their real life doppelgangers. Did 3 different versions of the same woman from different dimensions collide for this one bus ride? I sure hope so.
Number 5, supernatural children. This person described how she believes her child glitched in the simulation, or perhaps was having her superhero origin story. Late at night, she heard her 2-year-old daughter and 4-year-old son talking and giggling in their bedroom past their bedtime, so she went in to check on them. When she stepped into the room past the gate, she could make out their dark forms, each on their bed, and their voices coming from the 2 distinct places. As they were talking to each other, she felt something brush the back of her leg, but ignored it as she thought it was just one of their cats. Still hearing her daughter's voice clearly coming from the bed as they spoke. She then turned around expecting to see the cat to remove it from the room, but instead saw her 2-year-old daughter suddenly behind her. She says she heard no footsteps and didn't see her daughter leave the bed, her voice still coming from that area. She believes that there was a glitch in the simulation, causing her daughter to teleport. Number 4, body swap. This person tells a story of how someone they know apparently swapped bodies, a glitch causing them to appear as someone different. She and her husband had 2 neighbors across the street, another couple. The wife was a tiny blonde woman who would often wave across the street and they would chat occasionally. Eventually, the blonde woman went into labor and was taken to the hospital. When they returned, she saw a woman get out of the car with the baby, but instead it was a tall, large brunette with dark skin. Assuming that it was a relative who was helping with the baby, she and her husband brought over cookies and spoke to them. That's when she realized that the woman wasn't a relative, but the wife. Same name, personality, and everything except her body was now completely different. The poster's husband remembers the woman as having been blonde as well, them making jokes about having wife swapped at the hospital, much to the confusion of the neighbors. Number 3, the moon. This person was driving down the road with his mother when they both experienced the sky glitching. They were driving down a completely straight road to the theater on July 2nd when they were stopped at a red light, looking up and admiring the moon against the sunset. Just a few minutes later, they were going down that same straight road when they looked up again and saw that the moon had moved a significant distance, the mother noticing it as well and even looking scared at the thought. They then arrived at the parking lot and saw that the moon was still in the moved position, the person suddenly feeling the urge to look away. They say that they wanted to stare, but it felt like some sort of force was stopping them from looking. As soon as they felt like they could look again, the moon had suddenly moved back to the original position in just a few seconds. Them and their mother with no idea how to explain what had happened. They looked it up on Twitter and only found one other person saying, "Did the moon just move?" Number 2, the town. This person lives in a very rural area and as a result knows every town and road that's nearby. One day he was going to a different county to look at a lawnmower, another area that he was very familiar with. Well, on the way there, he drove through a town that has never been there before. It went by the same name as a small community that was normally there, but instead of just a few houses, there were now stores, cafes, and streetlights. Confused, he had to pull over and try and figure out what was going on. All the buildings looking brand new and clean, a contrast to the other towns surrounding it. He went into a cafe and asked the girl working there where he was, her responding with the same name of the small community. When he asked when all of it was built, she responded with the 1800s. Confused, he quickly left and continued on to get his lawnmower. And on the way back, all the new buildings and stores were gone again. Only the small old community standing in its place. Number 1. Teleportation. This person was driving home from work with their coworker to the place that they were staying at. They had driven the route a few times already and knew it pretty well. It was about a 7-minute drive and was a straight path until a turn into the hotel. They had made it pretty far and were about a block away, the sign visible at the side of the road. But then suddenly, they weren't. They looked around and saw that they were on a highway about to take an exit ramp 20 minutes away from their destination. Both him and the coworker having experienced the same thing. The time on the clock still reading the same time it had outside the hotel. Ever since then, he says he feels disconnected from life and disoriented, like something is still wrong. A glitch through the simulation potentially making the person realize that everything is not as it seems.
Imagine watching a live news report and suddenly the reporter's words turn into total gibberish. That's exactly what happened during a CBS Los Angeles broadcast from the 2011 Grammy Awards. Viewers were stunned when reporter Serene Branson went from speaking normally to uttering a string of nonsensical sounds on live TV.
Well, a very, very heavy debatation tonight. We had a very Darrison.
She visibly panicked as she realized something was wrong, leading many to fear that she was having a stroke on air. Paramedics rushed to examine her, and thankfully, her vital signs were normal. It turned out Serene had suffered a complex migraine that mimicked stroke-like symptoms, causing sudden aphasia or speech impairment. In other words, her brain glitched, scrambling her speech. The clip went viral as a real-life Matrix moment, a healthy young reporter seemingly malfunctioning without warning. It was a scary sight, but also a relief when we learned it wasn't a true stroke. Still, for a few seconds of live TV, it felt like reality itself had briefly broken down. A famous weatherman suddenly freezes like an NPC caught in lag. On the Today Show in 2012, co-hosts Savannah Guthrie and Matt Lauer finished a silly dance joking about leaving room for the Holy Ghost between dance partners. That's when Al Roker, the beloved NBC weatherman, did the unthinkable. He stared directly into the camera, motionless with a goofy grin for a full 17 seconds. He didn't blink, didn't move a muscle. It was as if someone hit the pause button on Al Roker. Roker later explained that it was a bit of deadpan humor, essentially a brain freeze challenge he did on purpose. The show's director egged him on to see how long he could hold the pose, and Al committed to the bit. Even so, watching it back, many viewers felt a chill. The moment looked so uncanny that it's now a classic glitch in the Matrix clip. During a live soccer match, a shadow person sprinted through the stands, and no one can agree if it was a glitch, a ghost, or just a camera trick. This incident happened at a stadium in La Paz, Bolivia, during a Fox Sports broadcast in 2014. In the footage, you see a dark, human-shaped figure running rapidly across the lower tier seats straight through the crowd, yet no one in the audience seems to react to it. Viewers at home were creeped out. Was it a ghost caught on live TV? Rational explanations soon emerged. Lighting snafu or video artifact, basically a technical glitch that made a real person's image smear across the screen. But that hasn't stopped wild theories. The clip went viral, with some saying the stadium is haunted or that we witnessed a Matrix running program acting up. What's freakier than one person glitching? How about two people glitching together? Twin sisters Paula and Bridget Powers from Australia gave an interview that left viewers' jaws on the floor. They were recounting a dramatic carjacking incident involving their mother, but it wasn't the story that stole the show, it was how they told it. The twins spoke in a mesmerizing stereo, often saying the exact same words at the exact same time during the live interview.
So we drop everything and we went running out the front. We seen Mum running out from the house up there.
At times, one twin would start a sentence and the other would finish it in perfect sync, as if they shared one mind. The effect was so uncanny that the clip went viral worldwide, and even Jimmy Kimmel invited them on his show out of sheer fascination. The sisters themselves just laughed it off, saying their brains think alike at the same time after a lifetime together. Indeed, Paula and Bridget have spent 51 years dressing alike, working together, and practically living in parallel. So while it seems paranormal, it's likely just an extraordinary sibling bond. Viewers thought they spotted a shape-shifting reptilian on the news, but the truth was more technological. In an old CTV news clip that resurfaced online, a female reporter delivers the headlines when suddenly her eyes appear to glitch. During a blink, her eyes don't look human for a split second, they seem fixed and glazed over, almost like a doll's, or a computer-rendered image. Experts explained that it was a rolling screen repaint artifact from the broadcast. Basically, this was an analog TV signal glitch. On old antenna TV, if the signal degrades at the wrong moment, in this case when she blinked, part of the previous frame's data can briefly hold on for a second. The result? Her eyes open from a prior frame overlaid on her face while blinking, creating a creepy illusion that her eyes blinked but didn't close? Technical or not, it looked really freaky, like an NPC in a video game failing to load its textures. Even after hearing the explanation, some joked, "Sure, that's what they want you to believe." This one isn't a glitch in the video, it's a glitch in the broadcast itself, and it's straight up like something out of a techno thriller. In November 1987, Chicago sportscaster Dan Roan was doing the nightly news when suddenly the signal hijacked. TV screens went black for a second, and then viewers were suddenly staring at a bizarre figure. Someone in a Max Headroom mask bobbing around in front of a swiveling metal background. No sound, just 30 seconds of this super creepy masked intruder. Engineers managed to regain control on that channel, but it wasn't over. About 2 hours later, during a Doctor Who episode on another station, Max Headroom hacker struck again, this time with audio. The masked person spoke in distorted garbles, laughed, moaned, even exposed their bare behind to the camera while being spanked with a fly swatter. Yeah, it was really weird. After about 90 seconds, the pirate broadcast ended. Viewers and station officials were completely baffled. Who was that? How did they break into major TV station signals? The Federal Communications Commission launched an investigation, but to this day, the culprits have still never been caught or identified. Even decades later, watching the Max Headroom incident on YouTube will give you a serious case of the heebie-jeebies. Somebody has the chance to have the best deathbed confession of all time. Imagine your grandfather, you're saying your final goodbyes, and he's like, "I was Max Headroom." That would be crazy.
So we just saw an item in someone's home doubling. How about a triple? This video comes from TikToker Bubble Tea Please, who experiences something very strange with her Apple Pencil. She has one pencil, and then suddenly there's a second one that she has no memory of buying, and it does not stop there. There's a third. All right, one extra item, I can see you somehow forgetting you bought a second one. Maybe someone came over and left their copy at your place, but 2 extra items that you have no recollection of acquiring, that's getting harder to brush off. Aside from this video being staged, of course. Now, Bubble Tea said she always would, laugh at Glitch in the Matrix type videos. She said stuff like this was entertaining, but it never felt real, not until it actually happened to her. And remember, these are Apple Pencils we're talking about here. I mean, they're not cheap. So the chances of buying multiple and forgetting about them is very slim unless you're suffering from some kind of cognitive issue like dementia. And I love the top comment on this video as well. It's always pens, necklaces, press-on nails, but never money. Never. So sadly true. TikTok user Brooks So Basic experienced something that's really stuck with her. She was legitimately unsettled by this.
So what happened was, I bought 2 water bottles like this. I have a little basket, I put both of the water bottles in. They were ice cold, like right out of the fridge. I opened it up and I started chugging it. Put the cap back on, set it back into my stroller.
So far, pretty simple. She buys 2 fresh water bottles, she opens one, starts to chug. So she very clearly drank from one of those bottles before setting it back down in the stroller. This is where things take a strange turn, because just moments later she goes to take another sip of her water, and that's when she notices it's suddenly full again. She thinks maybe she switched the fresh bottle with the open one before, so she goes to grab the other one.
I reach to grab my water and I notice that it's full still. So I grab the other water and I notice that it's full.
Both were sealed. Both were totally full. Now that is pretty bizarre. Brooke later said that if she'd been alone when this happened, she probably would have brushed it off, but because her family was there to witness it, she felt validated. Everyone saw her chugging from one of those bottles. She tried to come up with some kind of rational explanation for this, but nothing really sat right with her. Since that day, Brooke couldn't stop thinking about stuff like timeline shifts and alternate realities, like maybe she accidentally slipped into a different one. She actually feels like something changed after this too. Everything looks normal, but it doesn't feel normal. She can't really explain it, it's just off, like something's not quite where it should be. Once again, we have a video of someone suddenly finding a duplicate of something, this time with a children's toy. So mom is hanging out with her toddler, playing with one of those toys where it's a bucket with holes of various shapes in the lid that the kid can fit corresponding shapes into. Well, she had to pull out her phone and document it because she noticed there was suddenly an extra green star piece. She could have sworn that there were pairs of each shape, not 3. She asked the internet if they have the same toy and can confirm it, and I can. My son has one of these, and yeah, each shape comes in a pair. She had no idea where it could have come from. According to her, no one had visited the house with the same toys, so where did that extra piece come from? All right, so if we really are living in a simulation, I wonder if whoever or whatever is flying around in this craft is a part of the alien species overseeing it. This video was captured in Volusia County, Florida on August 16th, 2020, and it's pretty bizarre. So it's a beautiful sunny day at the beach. This woman pulls out her phone and starts filming the sky though, because she spots something hovering in the air, and it's not a plane. I know, it looks like a plane so far, but watch what it does. First, it was flying in a straight line, left to right, but then it abruptly zips back in the other direction. At breakneck speed, mind you. I mean, the thing is moving. It doesn't take long for it to zip off out of view. That's what people have commented on the most here. That speed at which it's moving and the abrupt change in direction. What do you think about this one? Share your thoughts down below. And wrapping things up, there's this weird clip from a girl who's convinced something's off about her backyard. The strange part is, it doesn't stay consistent. It literally changes depending on where she's standing. Like it's not the same space twice. So she pushes open the back door and walks outside. Right away, it doesn't match what she just saw from the balcony at all. The whole yard looks different. All that trash that was everywhere before, gone. Now, yeah, maybe it's staged, that's always on the table, but if it's not, then something here doesn't add up. Well, this is some strange footage. Someone was filming out the window of a plane to get some footage of the beautiful misty air and the sky people, the clouds. Wait a minute, sky people? Yeah, see those figures in the distance? What in the heck are those? They look human-shaped, so much so that when zoomed in on them, it looks like people out hiking through the snow, except the snow is clouds. The internet obviously lost its mind over this, with one person commenting, "They look like they're just standing there watching us go by." Another commented that the simulation was running out of memory and forgot to hide the NPCs. What is going on with these dogs? This one was uploaded to TikTok by Yikes Bikes, who was driving along the beach with some friends, filming the gorgeous bright blue water. Clearly this was not filmed in my neck of the woods. Anyway, when she spotted these dogs standing totally still along the shore, standing still is actually putting it very lightly, these two were frozen in place. And not only were they still as a statue, but the dogs looked identical, like they were copied and pasted. So what is going on here? Is it a glitch in the Matrix, or is there a more logical explanation? Share your thoughts down below. This next one is really weird. It comes from a CCTV camera somewhere in South America. It's one of those videos where you see this semi-translucent figure running through the frame, but in this case, there's more to it than that. We don't just get a ghostly figure here. This thing seems to interact with the two men walking through the area. Take a look. The first guy reacts like he's just bumped into someone, but all there is this vague ghostly shape. The shape moves with incredible speed, hitting the next guy. They both physically react to whatever this thing is, only they couldn't see it with their own eyes, otherwise they wouldn't have just walked right into it. Very, very strange clip. Ever found you suddenly have duplicates of something and you have no idea where the second one came from? Well, TikToker Roxy J. Mua experienced exactly that. She noticed a piece of her phone case sitting on her tabletop. She thought she'd broken it, but when she went and got her phone, she was shocked to find that the case was completely intact. She only has one copy of the case, so where did the broken part come from? What is going on with this pigeon? How about this one? And this one. There are tons of videos of birds frozen in midair, especially pigeons, and it makes sense. If we really are living in a complex simulation, pigeons would probably be the ones that glitch out the most. I mean, there's just so many of them, and they're just these basic, simple-minded creatures. And before anyone starts rushing to the comments to accuse me of calling pigeons dumb, let me just clarify, yes, they're mush-brained, idiotic rats with wings. They're always flying up in your face. If you live in an apartment, they'll probably perch on your balcony. They got their poop everywhere. They make annoying hooting noises in the morning. Are the worst. This clip is from a dash cam at an intersection in Singapore. A white BMW is waiting to turn, inching forward while traffic passes. A van goes by, the driver waits a second, then starts moving. Once it looks clear, right as the BMW pulls out, a smaller car suddenly cuts across and the two crash into each other. Luckily, no one was hurt, but if the first driver had pulled up a little sooner, this could have been really bad. This is some crazy footage. I mean, you just don't see that car coming at all. It really looks like it just appears in the middle of the intersection at the exact moment the BMW moves. So people started calling it a ghost car. One description compared it to something like Back to the Future, like it just zapped into our timeline. Aren't there enough accidents on the road already without having to deal with cars crossing over from another reality in the middle of the road all of a sudden? See if you spot something strange here. How did that binder go from green to red instantly like that? At first you'd think maybe he swapped it out. Maybe he had two binders and switched them while he was passing the car, but I mean, if you watch closely, there's no movement that lines up with that. His arms stay in the exact same position the entire time, but then boom, different color. People were of course throwing out all kinds of explanations, but the only one that matters for the purposes of this video is of course reality glitching. It's supposed to be red the whole time, but then oops, little glitch in the system, and the evidence of us living in the Matrix continues to mount. Dr. Roman Yampolsky, a computer scientist at the University of Louisville and expert in AI safety, was on the Diary of a CEO podcast about a month back. One of the questions he was asked is if he thinks we're living in a simulation. In his words, he's almost certain we are. They mentioned Google's Genie 3, where you basically just put in a prompt and it'll spit out an AI image, but not just an AI image, it's like a 3D image, actually more like a full-on landscape you can explore and interact with, and it looks better than most modern video games. I mean, we're not far off from it looking just as real as the world in front of your actual eyes. And that's kind of the point. The doctor said, well, if we can already create limitless virtual worlds that are almost indistinguishable from reality, the chances that we're living in one are actually pretty high. Most of the episode is dedicated to the dangers of AI though, and let me just warn you all, if you want to have a good day today, maybe don't watch this podcast. If you work in AI though, or are one of the billionaires funding this stuff, you need to watch this. Basic summary of the podcast, the doctor says humanity is just done if we continue along this path, and that's within the next couple decades, maybe even less. There's just virtually no good that can come of this. You've heard people say information is power, right? Well, a scientist from the UK named Melvin Vobson thinks information might actually be a real thing, meaning a fifth kind of matter. We already know about solids, liquids, gases, and plasma. At least some of us know about plasma anyway. That one doesn't come up quite as much in daily life, but Vobson says, well, maybe information itself could be another one. His idea is that every particle, like an electron, carries data, almost like a tiny computer file. He's planning an experiment where he'll make an electron and its antimatter twin called a positron crash into each other inside a piece of metal. Normally, they destroy each other and make energy, but he says if you also erase the information they hold, there could be extra energy released. If that really happens, it would mean information has mass. Basically, if you deleted a file on your computer would weigh just a tiny bit less. Too small to ever notice physically, but still there. Most scientists think this is a stretch, but if he's right, it means bits of information are just as real as atoms. Now, what does this have to do with the simulation theory, though? Well, if information has mass, it's something real, not just numbers. And the whole universe might be made of data. Every particle, every atom would just be a piece of stored information. It would mean we're not just surrounded by information, we are information. Some scientists are testing if the universe has bugs in it, meaning like video game glitches. There's an experiment in Illinois called the holometer that tried to find one. It used 2 super accurate lasers to see if space itself shakes or flickers at a super tiny level. If it did, that would mean the universe might be made of tiny digital bits, like pixels. The idea was that if both lasers got out of sync, could mean space has a kind of static to it, a sign that we're living in something built, not natural. So far, nothing like that has shown up. The scientists said space seems smooth, not pixelated, at least where they can measure, but astronomers are also studying the oldest light in the universe, the cosmic microwave background, or CMB. If they ever find strange patterns or repeating marks in that light, it might mean something's off with the way the universe renders itself. And here's a weird idea. What if everything around you, space, time, your body, is kind of like a hologram? That what we see in 3D could come from information written on a 2D surface, like how a holographic sticker looks 3D even though it's flat. This idea started when scientists like Jacob Bekenstein and Stephen Hawking studied black holes. They found that what falls into a black hole depends on its surface area, not how big it is inside. Basically, all the information about the stuff that falls into a black hole, like its mass and energy, doesn't depend on the inside of the black hole. Instead, it depends on the surface around it, called the event horizon. All the information is stored on the outside edge, not inside. That's really weird, because normally you'd think the bigger the inside, the more information it could hold, but that's not what the math shows. Later, scientists from the University of Southampton looked at tiny ripples in the leftover light from the Big Bang, again the cosmic microwave background. They were looking for tiny patterns or ripples in that light that might give us some clues as to how the universe came to be. If the universe works like a hologram, some directions or areas in space could show unusual alignments, say patterns that repeat. Well, they did find a few strange patterns. It's not definitive proof, but there is a chance it's a sign our universe is actually stored on a flat 2D surface like a projection. This is kind of unsettling. Scientists think space and time might have a smallest possible size. Think of this like zooming in on a photo. At first it looks clear, but the closer you get, the more you start to see little squares, pixels. The universe might work the same way. There's a point where you just can't zoom in any further because reality itself gets pixelated. That point is called the Planck scale. It's so small, it's basically impossible to picture, way smaller than an atom. At that level, space stops being smooth. It's more like tiny, invisible building blocks. Some scientists think that time could work that way as well, not as a smooth flow, but as tiny ticks, like frames in a movie almost. Earlier this year, researchers published a paper called The Reevaluation of the Planck Scale in a Discrete Framework. They argued that space might not just seem grainy, it might actually be made of little pieces. Another idea, called the generalized uncertainty principle, says if you try to measure something smaller than that limit, physics itself stops you, as if reality has a maximum level of detail. Now, that sounds a lot like what you'd expect if we were living inside something that had been programmed. Back in the early 2000s, theoretical physicist James Gates noticed something strange while studying supersymmetry. That's a theory trying to explain how all the particles in the universe fit together. When he broke down the math, he found patterns that looked exactly like error-correcting codes. That's the kind of digital code built into your computer or phone to stop data from getting corrupted. It's what makes sure a video doesn't glitch or a file doesn't break when you save it. Gates described it like finding computer code buried in the equations that run the universe. He compared it to the same kind of structure used in web browsers, and He's not talking about a metaphor. It's literally the same type of logical code used in modern computing. Now, not everyone agrees this means the universe is programmed, of course. Some scientists think it's just a coincidence, that this code shows up because the math that we use just happens to be efficient the same way computers are. But it's still weird to think that the rules behind reality seems to use the same logic that our technology does. Most of us would assume that if we are living in a simulation, there's some kind of intelligent entity running it. Aliens, future versions of humans, yada yada. But there's another twist on the simulation idea that doesn't involve any higher power, so to speak. Instead, some scientists and philosophers think the universe could be self-simulating. That means reality is creating itself. There's no computer sitting outside our world running everything. The universe is the computer. One of the biggest names pushing this idea is Dr. Brian Whitworth, who's written several papers comparing the universe to an information system. The basic idea is that consciousness, the fact that we're aware of being here, might actually be part of the code that keeps the simulation running. It's a loop. Reality generates consciousness, and consciousness keeps the simulation stable by observing it. Hard to wrap your head around, but it does connect to real physics. There have been experiments that show some tiny particles don't decide what they are or where they are until someone actually looks at them. Some researchers say maybe that's how the universe saves processing power in a way. It only renders, for lack of a better word, when something is watching. Kind of like how in a video game, it loads the graphics only where the player is looking. And here's the biggest issue with this whole simulation thing. There's really no way to definitively prove or disprove it. Even if scientists found what looked like a glitch, a perfect simulation could just fix it instantly. We may never know if what we see is real or just a simulation. Physicists like Sabine Hossenfelder and George Smoot have both said that while the idea is fascinating, it's also basically impossible to confirm. There's no experiment that can separate base reality from a simulated one if the simulation is flawless. And if the simulation theory is true, then even all your tools for testing it, your equipment, your thoughts, your whole logic, it's all part of the simulation as well. That's what makes this topic so unsettling. It's scientific, but it's also philosophical at the same time. So until whatever's running the simulation reveals itself, if that ever happens, we're just stuck with a question that might not have an answer. On August 5th, 2009, people watching the morning news on BBC Northeast caught a glitch in the sky that still has not been explained. Anchor Colin Briggs was just going through the headlines like any other day. A live webcam feed on the Millennium Bridge in Newcastle was running behind him. And then out of nowhere, this bright white streak of light just zips across the background. What makes it weird is the trajectory. It didn't fall toward the ground like a meteor, it shot upward at insane speed and then just blinked out of existence. Once the clips hit the internet, people were convinced they'd caught a UFO on live TV. Some were saying it was probably just a bird or a remote-controlled plane, possible, but it didn't really appear to be either of those things. Even Nick Pope, who used to run UFO investigations for the UK Ministry of Defense, he took a look at the footage and admitted it didn't look like a bird at all. He described the way it moved as, quote, genuinely strange. The BBC eventually did a follow-up segment asking the public for their theories, but they never actually provided a solid answer. Back in December 2024, people over in Surrey, BC in Canada looked up to see the sky lit up with all these crazy colors. The bright multicolored lights were stretching up into the atmosphere. One local, Melissa Knight, took to a Facebook group asking, "What is happening in the skies over in Cloverdale this morning?" And the photos she posted were pretty amazing. Naturally, the internet went through the usual checklist. Some people went straight to aliens, while others thought it might be light pollution bleeding out from nearby cannabis greenhouses. The most scientific guess was light pillars, where ice crystals in the air catch and bend light into vertical beams, but as one commenter put it, that's a thing that happens in other places, but I've never heard of it here. Despite all the theories, there was never an official confirmation of what those lights actually were. Imagine looking up at the sky and seeing two suns staring back at you. You'd probably picture yourself on an alien planet, but this has been known to happen right here on Earth. Is this some kind of camera trick, a lens flare? Or are these clips capturing an overlap between parallel universes or some kind of mirror reality? Jim Kaler, an astronomer from the University of Illinois, has weighed in on this, calling it a, quote, pretty darn rare optical refraction. Even though he's a man of science, he admits it isn't fully explained, stating, "I doubt it's been computer modeled. There must have been some blob of atmosphere somewhere that caused this truly spectacular phenomenon, which, in a sense, is a mirage." The weird part is that typical mirages happen when light bends vertically. These double suns are sitting side by side. Back in the day, Flemish astronomer Marcel Minoret wrote about this. He was so convinced by the evidence that he wrote, "So many other instances have been reported that there is no longer any doubt about observations of sun and mock suns being at exactly the same altitude." According to an atmospheric scientist named Grant Perry, quote, "This is not a common optical phenomenon that we're seeing here." So what do you all think? Is there a logical, grounded explanation for this? Or, with everyone recording everything at all times nowadays, are we capturing evidence of the simulation glitching before our very eyes?
The school. This person recounted their story of how their school seemed to suddenly change. They started a new school just a few years ago and remember exploring the school for the first time. They have a clear memory of walking up a flight of stairs to get to the second floor, seeing 2 water fountains to the left and the bathrooms to the right. They didn't return there for a while as it was on the opposite end of their classroom and they had no need to go there. The next school year, they walked down to that end of the school again and realized that the staircase was nowhere to be found and there was no second floor at all, merely a blank wall remaining where the stairs had been. He wasn't the only one to remember it either, a few of his other friends having memories of the second floor. There was also no record or evidence of the second floor having potentially been demolished in that time, a potential glitch in the matrix putting a staircase where there had never actually been one. Number 9. Tomato soup. This person described their glitch in the matrix, also thinking it possible that they may have fallen into a parallel universe. Him and a close friend were working on a creative project together and they met each week at the same restaurant to go over the progress and discuss their work. The restaurant they always visited had a wall that was lined with jars of Caesar dressing and vodka sauce, knowing that these were the exact things on the wall as they would examine them and even read out the calorie contents. Their father then passed away, and in an attempt to get back to normal, he decided to meet up with a friend at the restaurant again the week after. But when he got there, he realized that the walls were now lined with jars of Caesar dressing and tomato soup instead of vodka sauce. While they could have just swapped them out, he says he asked the staff and they said they had never had vodka sauce on the wall. The person believing that the shock of their father's death caused them to experience a glitch in the matrix. Number 8. Different language. This person shared the fact that they had always been a sleep talker and even a sleepwalker. His family apparently never being able to distinguish whether or not he was awake as he would always have his eyes open. He tells a story of how he had been close with his freshman roommate in college, him not minding the sleep talking as he would find it amusing to hear what the person had to say. One night he apparently started talking in his sleep about wanting a hamburger, the roommate replying that while everything was closed. The person insisted they needed a hamburger now and the conversation continued like this until he eventually fell back asleep. When he woke up, his roommate said to him, "I didn't know you could speak Spanish." They had apparently had the entire conversation in Spanish, despite the person not actually knowing the language. The roommate had studied Spanish for many years and swears that he was totally fluent. The roommate's girlfriend, who had been on FaceTime that night, even backed him up, saying that she too had heard him speak in Spanish. Number 7. Outside reality. This person was on a trip with his friends floating down Lake Powell, going deeper and deeper into the canyon. He suddenly had a thought cross his head that it was so beautiful it looked fake, like it was specifically designed to be that way. As soon as he thought it, his friend turned to him and said, "Dude, it feels like we're in a movie and we're looking at movie props. It looks so fake." The two mildly freaking out about how they seemed to briefly share a brain cell. A little later on, he said he experienced what he describes as an altered state of consciousness, saying he felt like the facade of the human experience was dropped and all his his friends looked like angelic beings enjoying Earth. At the same time, the same friend turned to him and said, "Dude, look at our friends. They're so beautiful and alive, they look like angels." He says he believes they were able to see past the simulation and tap into the true reality. He also clarifies that they were both sober and it wasn't just the trip of a lifetime. Number 6. Zombie. This person who works in the admitting department of their local hospital believes they experienced a glitch where the past changed and somebody came back from the dead. A few years ago, one of their co-workers in another department passed away, him being responsible for processing the co-worker's obituary. The co-worker's daughter was good friends with their cousin, so they saw her at the co-worker's house after the funeral, holding a large ceremony for the mother. Then recently, the co-worker's daughter walked in, saying that her mom was in the ER. The person was obviously confused as they knew that the girl's mother was dead. Due to being so shocked, a co-worker had to step in and look up the girl's mother, showing it to be the woman who died years ago, but she was actually alive and in the hospital. The person not being able to find the obituary that they had processed. When they spoke later, the girl said that other people had also been coming up to her about the situation, saying that they too remember her mother dying.
Starting off, we were talking about the argument of high probability. Some philosophers, like Nick Bostrom, have cooked up a theory that feels like it can't be real, but it is actually taken quite seriously by some scientists. They say there's a high chance that we are living in a simulation. Bostrom argues that one of these 3 scenarios is probably true. First, that extinction is the norm. Almost all civilizations out there, like ours, never make it past a certain point. They wipe themselves out or get destroyed before they can really get advanced technology. It's a little bit terrifying, right? Imagine countless civilizations reaching the brink of greatness only to fall into the abyss of extinction. It's like cosmic Russian roulette. The second scenario is that no one's playing games. The advanced civilizations that do make it decide running simulations of their past, like their own version of super advanced ancestry.com, is boring or pointless. So they don't bother creating these massive virtual worlds to see what their ancestors were like. The third scenario is that this is all make-believe. Definitely the scariest of the scenarios, that we are actually living in a giant computer game right now. That our entire universe with its stars, planets, and morning coffee is just some super advanced alien software running on a cosmic computer. So why is this unsettling? Well, if we're in a simulation, then who's controlling it? What happens if they decide to hit the off switch? It's like being a character in someone else's video game, and it makes you wonder, are our choices really our own, or are we just following the pre-written code of some cosmic programmer? This theory gives a whole new meaning to the question, what is reality? And honestly, it's a little bit spooky when you really think about it. Next, we are talking about the second law of infodynamics. So a physicist studying the mutations of the SARS-CoV-2 virus has stirred up quite the conversation with claims that hint we might be living in a simulated universe. Dr. Melvin Vopson, the scientist behind these claims, introduces, quote, the second law of infodynamics, suggesting that mutations in the virus aren't random but follow this new law. He's found that information entropy, a measure of disorder from an information perspective, decreases over time in these mutations, opposing what we see with typical entropy, which increases. This discovery is more than just a quirky observation. Vopson argues it could flip our understanding of evolution on its head and even hint at a universe that's more orderly and deterministic than we thought. He connects this to the idea that the universe might be a giant simulation, designed with data optimization to minimize computational needs. In his studies, particularly with the ever-mutating SARS-CoV-2, Vopson has observed patterns that he believes can't be dismissed as random. He suggests that if we start viewing genetic mutations deterministically, we could potentially predict mutations before they happen, which could revolutionize genetic therapies and vaccine development. However, the physics community is still skeptical, and more research is needed to test these very bold ideas. Vopson's theory, while intriguing, remains on the fringe, and proving it might involve experiments that check if information itself has mass. A concept that could tie back to everything from the heat death of the universe to why symmetry is so common in nature. So while the second law of infodynamics opens up fascinating possibilities, it is a long road from hypothesis to accepted science, especially with claims this big. But who knows? Sometimes the strangest ideas lead to the most profound discoveries. Next, we are talking about the limitations in the laws of physics. So think about the speed of light. Nothing can go faster, right? It's like the universe has a top speed limit, and no matter what you do, you can't break it. This reminds some people of a video game, where the game can only process things so fast, so it sets limits to keep everything running smoothly. Then there's the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, a weird rule in quantum mechanics that says you can't know both the position and the speed of a tiny particle at the same time. It's as if the universe saves on processing power by not deciding where something is until it absolutely has to, kind of like a game that only loads the parts of the world you're looking at to save memory. These rules of physics might make you wonder if they're just programming constraints in a giant cosmic simulation set up to keep things manageable for whatever's running the show. Isn't it a bit like we're living in a cleverly crafted game where certain things are off limits to prevent the whole system from crashing? It's definitely a wild thought, but it sure makes you look at those science class lessons a little bit differently. Next, we are talking about the observer effect. So have you ever heard of the downright bizarre behavior of particles in the quantum world? In quantum mechanics, things get really weird because particles, like electrons, don't settle on a specific location or path until we actually check up on them. Kind of like they're all potential and no decision until observed. This quirkiness is known as quantum indeterminacy and the observer effect. So now think about how video games work. Alright, it's just the easiest parallel, so there's going to be a lot of video game talk. They don't bother rendering every single part of the game world all at once. Instead, they only show you what's in your current view to save on the processing power. It's like the game is saying, why bother with the rest if you're not even looking there? This is eerily similar to what's happening at the quantum level. It's as if our universe is running a super efficient simulation, doing calculations only when necessary to make sure it doesn't waste any resources. This parallel makes some folks wonder if maybe, just maybe, we're living in some sort of cosmic video game where things aren't fully decided until they need to be. Next, we are talking about mathematical consistencies. Have you ever noticed how everything in the universe seems to follow a specific set of rules, almost like it's all part of a gigantic mathematical equation? Pretty wild when you actually think about it, from the way the planets orbit the sun to how your coffee spreads out when you spill it. There's math everywhere. This isn't just a coincidence. The universe is actually incredibly consistent and can be described really well using mathematical principles, just like a computer program. This consistency is what gets some people thinking. Maybe our universe is a bit like a game or a simulation. I mean, really just think about it. In video games, everything from the graphics to the physics is governed by code, by math. So when scientists find that even the most chaotic and complex systems in our universe can still be nailed down with equations, it makes you wonder if there's some sort of computational foundation underneath it all. So why is this exciting? Well, it suggests that maybe our whole universe could be running on a vast cosmic computer with every star, planet, and galaxy following a set of mathematical instructions. It's like the universe is a giant puzzle and math is the key to unlocking its secrets. I feel like that's a nightmare for a lot of us. Like, oh no, not math. The one thing I can't understand. I actually like math. Well, I guess we all have to. Next, we are talking about the anomalies in the cosmic microwave background. So for this one, we are taking a look at the universe's oldest light. That is the cosmic microwave background, also known as the CMB. This is like the universe's baby picture taken shortly after the Big Bang. Now, this light should be pretty uniform, but scientists have noticed some weird patterns and anomalies in it. It's as if the universe has a slight glitch or a kind of a cosmic watermark showing up in this ancient glow. Some folks think these odd patterns might be like the digital artifacts you see in images that have been compressed too much, or when your video video game starts showing weird lines because of a graphics bug. What's super intriguing is that these anomalies could hint at a digital grid or a kind of underlying scaffold to space-time, sort of like how pixels build up your screen. If our universe were a simulation, you might expect to see some clues at the largest scales, and these odd patterns in the CMB are like potential Easter eggs left by the universe's programmers. Next, we are talking about Gödel's incompleteness theorems. So these theorems are like the ultimate brain teasers of the math world. They tell us that if you have a robust enough system of math, the kind you could use to describe, say, the entire universe, there are always going to be some puzzles you can't solve, no matter how hard you try. It's like having a never-ending list of riddles where some just don't have an answer. Now, think about a computer simulation. Even the most powerful video game or simulation has its limits. There are certain things that it just can't compute or display. Gödel's theorems suggest something similar about our universe. There might be cosmic rules that are kind of like a computer's programming constraints. These unprovable truths could mean we're in a giant cosmic simulation where some things are set up just so the system can keep running without crashing. It's a mind-bending idea that maybe some of the mysteries in the universe are unsolvable because they're built into the code of our reality. Next, we are talking about the bootstrap paradox, which in physics is like a cosmic chicken or the egg scenario that really twists your brain. Imagine you write a story where a scientist receives a mysterious notebook from the future filled with ideas that they then publish. Where did the original idea come from? Similarly, in physics, we have laws that could potentially explain how entire universes, including one like ours, might be created. It's as if the universe could contain the recipe for making more universes, including itself. This kind of mind-bending, self-creating loop is like a video game where characters discover they can design and spawn new levels or even new games from within the game they're already playing. It suggests our universe could be just one level in an epic cosmic game, constantly spawning new universes in a never-ending cycle. So next time you're pondering the mysteries of the cosmos, consider that maybe we're in a universe that's bootstrapping itself into existence. Next, we are talking about the black hole information paradox. Imagine you toss your favorite book into a black hole, a bit dramatic, I know. According to the rules of quantum mechanics, the information in that book should be preserved somewhere, somehow, because in the quantum world, information never really disappears. But black holes, these cosmic vacuum cleaners, seem to suck everything in and let nothing out, not even light, which makes it look like the information just vanishes from the universe. This dilemma is what scientists call the black hole information paradox. Now here's where things get really sci-fi. Some smart folks think this paradox could be a clue that we are living in a cosmic hologram. They suggest that all the information swallowed by the black hole might actually be stored on its surface, kind of like how your phone stores stuff in the cloud. I'm still trying to figure out what the cloud is. This idea is part of the holographic principle, which hints that our entire 3D universe might be a projection from a 2D boundary. This very mind-bending concept fits nicely with the simulation hypothesis, suggesting that what we experience as three-dimensional could be just another level of grand cosmic simulation. And finally on our list today, we are talking about tampering with the experiment. So imagine if we found out for sure that our whole life is just a massive computer game and everything we've just spoken about is in fact true. Now that's what Professor Preston Green from Nanyang Technological University in Singapore is thinking about. He's pretty worried that if our scientists ever manage to prove that we're living in a simulation, it could cause a huge mess. So here's the deal. According to Green, if we start running experiments and suddenly figure out that yes, we are indeed a simulation, this could really mess up the whole point of why we're being simulated in the first place. Green suggests that if we get too nosy and prove that we're just bits of data in a cosmic computer, the beings running this show might just hit the off switch. Why? Well, because if we know we're in a simulation, then we'll probably change our behavior so much that the simulation stops being useful for whatever questions our creators are trying to answer about their own world. So, while it's fun and kind of weird to think about being in a giant video game, Green warns that proving it could lead to game over for all of us.
In our number 5 spot, we have the remote. This story sounds a little bit more like they may be housing a ghost rather than it was a Matrix glitch, but since the latter is what this Reddit user believes, I'll leave that up to you to decide. Apparently, a woman and her husband lost their TV remote and could not find it anywhere, that they decided to order a new one. Naturally, on the day the remote was being dropped off, this woman went to her door to get the remote from the delivery person, brought it inside, went to her couch to sit down and watch TV, only to look down and see her old remote sitting in the middle of the carpet in front of the TV. What? That's too crazy to not be a ghost, right? I don't know, maybe it was a Matrix glitch. Would love to know your thoughts in the comment section below. In our number 4 spot, we have the milk cartons. This one is so movie-like, it's creepy. A man was pouring himself a cup of tea, and as always, he put some milk in his tea. He heard the doorbell ring, so he put the milk in the fridge and then went to answer the door. When he came out, he saw the milk beside his tea. He thought, well, that's weird. I thought I put the milk in the fridge. So he goes to put the milk in the fridge, and lo and behold, there are 2 milk cartons. He swears that he never bought a second milk. Whoa, this was definitely a glitch of the Matrix. Please, universe, let me experience something like this in my life. In our number 3 spot, we have the prediction. This Reddit user was 40 years old and recently divorced and just chatting to an employee at the time when she suddenly saw a flash in her mind of her being married to this employee and with 2 kids, and they were living somewhere hot. Flash forward to 5 years in the future where she is actually married to this guy, has 2 kids, and he just recently got a promotion to move to the Middle East. Is this one a glitch or a psychic prediction? And are glitches just psychic predictions? I think possibly yes, but curious to know your thoughts. In our number 2 spot, we have 2 women eat times 3. In this photo, there appears to be 2 women in 3 consecutive booths, one after the other, and they are each wearing the same color or a version of the shade in the exact place. Each woman seems to have similar hairstyles, with the color only changing slightly due to the age. Many people have speculated that the picture shows us 3 alternate reality dimensions where one of the women is older or younger, her hair is a bit shorter, etc. And I would have to agree. How is this even real? How did all of these women choose the same restaurant, and how are they seated beside each other? Huh? Clearly this photo is a blip in the Matrix and showing us 3 realities. In our number 1 spot, we have the bald spots. This photo is crazy, so crazy that it just had to be in first. What are the odds of 5 men with the same bald spot all sitting on the same bus in a seat that is one after the other? How? Something happened in the Matrix that day, clearly, and it created this blip. This is honestly magical to look at. Seeing this just brought the biggest smile to my face and put me in a state of wonder about the mysteries of the world that are yet to be discovered. I hope it did the same for you.
Alright, so you may not feel this one belongs in the glitch in the simulation category, but I do. This is weird as hell. When are you ever gonna hear a sentence like this? A video was captured of a robot chasing wild boars in Poland. And no, this apparently isn't AI. Tons of news sites have been reporting on this. Witnesses captured this humanoid robot named Edward running across an open field straight at a group of wild boars. The boars scatter almost immediately. It's weird. I mean, you're watching animals react the way they normally would to a human or a predator, which it isn't. It's this stiff mechanical robot sprinting over them. The robot moves in that slightly unnatural way too, where it's almost human, but it's not quite right. From what was reported, Edward is an experimental robot. It's being tested outdoors to see how it handles real environments. I mean, yeah, we're living in the future. This next video comes from Alex Schall, a Florida-based real estate agent who owns an Airbnb property about 5 hours away from where he lives. He was checking in on the place through one of his security cameras one day, when he noticed this random guy wearing a white t-shirt and shorts walking through the front gate of the property. At first, Schall thought the guy was trying to break into the house. Instead, the guy wandered around for a bit and then headed into the backyard and walked straight into a small shed. And he never came back out. Schall actually tried yelling at him through the camera's microphone, but there was no response. The shed door was open, but there was no movement inside. Eventually, he called the police. Officers showed up, they checked the yard, they searched the entire shed, and they found nothing. Somehow, the guy had slipped away without being seen. Alex scrubbed the footage over and over again, and he never saw the dude come out of that shed. And the next day, things got even weirder. He got another alert. When he checked the footage, a man walked out of the shed. But it was a different man this time. This guy looked older, he had white hair, he was wearing completely different clothes. There was no footage of this second guy entering the shed at all, but when Alec compared the two men, he noticed their facial features were oddly similar. Alec's view of this whole situation, he thinks the dude is a time traveler. So this is a weird one. So a mom is in the car with her kids. She hears a kerfuffle in the backseat, so she turns around to see what's going on, and then she starts recording because there's a water bottle kind of floating in the air. Almost looks like the top is attached to the roof, but the bottle is gently spinning. And the kids have no idea what's going on. The mom is like, "What's up? Why is it doing that?" And her son responds saying that he has no idea, that it just started floating.
Can someone please explain the science?
Are you lying, Matthew? Why is it doing that?
I swear on my life, it just floated.
The bottle wasn't by an air vent.
Is there air underneath? What is going on?
The air.
No, the air is not, it's not by the vent.
And it isn't actually attached to the roof.
It's not even attached to the roof.
Yeah.
So, what the hell is going on here? Well, according to this kid,
It's freaking haunted. That's crazy.
it's freaking haunted. Yeah, there could be a logical explanation for this, but other than a hoax, I can't think of one off the top of my head. One thing I will say is that the reactions in the video do seem pretty genuine. From Miss Elm 1234, we have a glitch in the Matrix involving a book. So she purchased a novel called The Light of Days for her book club. While organizing her books to put on her new bookshelf, she noticed that she suddenly had a second copy of The Light of Days. Now, that doesn't sound all that crazy. As one commenter pointed out, did you host a book club and somebody left it with you, or you brought it home from the night? The uploader responded saying, no, it was an online book club, so I didn't even know anyone else personally reading it, and it's not my normal read, so I would not have already owned it.
When a news crew went looking for ghost stories, they might have gotten more than they bargained for. In 2021, WNYT News Channel 13 in upstate New York did a live report from the Green Ridge Cemetery as part of a Halloween segment. Reporter Sam Hessler was on air in the pre-dawn hours, walking among the tombstones while a guide shared spooky historical tales. The broadcast went smoothly until viewers at home noticed something on their screens that even the crew on site missed. In the background, behind Sam, a misty white figure seemed to drift between the graves. It was brief and subtle, a flicker of what looked like a person or a fog moving fast. After the live shot, one astonished viewer alerted the station, and Sam herself was stunned reviewing the footage. She hadn't seen anything in person. WNYT later acknowledged the eerie moment, assuring folks the clip was unedited and truly aired live. The internet, of course, lit up with ghost caught on live TV posts and theories. Some paranormal enthusiasts called it one of the best accidental ghost sightings on a news broadcast, evidence of a spirit roaming the cemetery. Skeptics countered that it could have been a camera glitch, a passing car's headlights reflecting, or even a stray piece of insect or dust close to the lens creating a blur. The station's own write-up teased it as something almost too crazy to be real and encouraged viewers to watch and decide for themselves. You're watching HGTV and suddenly an emergency alert pops up warning that the end of the world is here. What do? That nightmare scenario actually happened to some TV viewers in Southern California in September 2017. Without warning, regular programming was interrupted by the emergency alert system. The typical alert banner scrolled, but then things got truly terrifying. A booming male voice came on and proclaimed, "Realize this, that in the last days extremely violent times will come." Imagine hearing that out of the blue on a Thursday morning and you're just trying to love it or list it. Understandably, people freaked out. It sounded like a prophecy of an imminent apocalypse or some wartime broadcast. As dramatic as it was, this turned out not to be the work of pranksters or an alien overlord, but simply a technical glitch and incredibly bad timing during a routine test of the emergency alert system. In short, the system glitched out and aired a fire and brimstone sermon by mistake. Cox and Spectrum cable customers heard what sounded like a doomsday warning, but it was just Pastor Chuck Swindoll quoting the Bible, 2 Timothy 3:1, on an FM station. Both the cable company and the FCC confirmed it was an error, not a hack, but not before scaring the heck out of viewers. In the middle of a live US Congress debate, viewers suddenly saw something Russian. In January 2017, politics junkies watching a C-SPAN online feed got a strange surprise. The feed, which was showing a live House of Representatives session, abruptly switched to Russia Today, the Kremlin-funded news channel, for about 10 minutes. Given that this occurred amid intense news about Russian cyber interference, many thought C-SPAN had been hacked by Russians in real time. C-SPAN quickly investigated and put out a statement. They didn't believe it was a hack, but rather a routing technical error. The leading theory is that some glitch caused the RT feed to literally overlap and replace the C-SPAN feed on their site. In simulation terms, it's like two different programs momentarily cross-wired. The timing, however, was almost comical. It happened just hours after a power outage oddly halted a Senate hearing about Russian hacking. Even Waters, whose speech was interrupted, remarked on the curious timing and demanded a clear explanation. Seeing Moscow news pop up in a US government broadcast felt like a scene from a spy movie, or a reminder that the simulation has a twisted sense of humor. Our final glitch was literally one word caught in an endless loop, and of course, that word was Russia. Also in January 2017, I guess a bad month for TV gremlins, MSNBC's show Hardball experienced a freaky moment. Journalist Dave Ignatius was talking to host Chris Matthews about, ironically, Russian interference in US politics. He said the word Russia and bang. The screen flickered and started repeating Russia, Russia, Russia over and over in a feedback loop. Chris Matthews looked confused as the glitch kept going for several seconds, echoing Russia in a creepy cadence until the control room cut to commercial. Given the climate at the time, Twitter exploded with jokes that Moscow hackers or the Kremlin Matrix had struck again, but most likely this was just a bizarre technical malfunction. Perhaps a failing satellite feed or encoding error that caused a few seconds of audio/video to loop. The fact it looped that particular word on that particular topic, well, that was gold for conspiracy lovers and also late night comedians. MSNBC assured it wasn't intentional and nothing nefarious was found. If we do live in a simulation, it definitely has a flair for dramatic irony. List in our number 10 spot, we have the Mandela effect. The Mandela effect began being widely recognized when people began to swear that they could remember Nelson Mandela passing away in the 1980s. This is of course weird since he actually passed away in 2013. This is obviously a huge time discrepancy, so people were very confused. This is of course how it got the name the Mandela effect, and it basically is the theory that whoever is responsible for this simulation we live in has gone back and changed some things. There is an alternate belief that the Mandela effect shows that there are multiple universes or alternate realities, and this is just a result of us crossing from one to another. Other really famous cases of the Mandela effect are the Bernstein Bears, where some people swear it used to be spelled with the ending being S-T-E-I-N, while all copies are now spelled S-T-A-I-N. Or the popular peanut butter brand called Jif, there are people who swear it used to be called Jiffy. This one, however, is my personal favorite. There are people who remember there being a movie called Shazam where Sinbad played a genie. A lot of people speculate, though, that they are just getting it mixed up with a movie where Shaq played a genie called Kazam. I definitely remember the Berenstain Bears one and the Shazam one, so I just might be a believer that this all really is a simulation.
At number 9, aliens. Over the years, we've spent billions of dollars trying to get to outer space and trying to find signs of extraterrestrial life or any past lives on other planets. Despite all of our best efforts, we haven't been able to find any aliens. This theory goes that the reason we haven't been able to find aliens is either because they're the ones running the simulation in the first place, or it's possible that if they are part of the simulation, they may be more advanced than us and have possibly found a way to escape. It's also possible that maybe the computer just doesn't have enough RAM to simulate another planet's civilization. This is all to say that maybe if we were able to find aliens, then we'd finally get the answers that we're looking for.
In our number 8 spot today, we have a computer virus in a DNA strand. Before I dive into this one, guys, please don't forget to hit the thumbs up button if you're enjoying the video so far, because it really helps us out. In 2017, a group of researchers from different scientific backgrounds at the University of Washington proved that they were able to put computer code into DNA strands. My brain is honestly unable to even comprehend this, but apparently it's true. The whole goal of the research was to be able to prove that computers that work in gene sequencing were very vulnerable to cyber attack. It seems as though they may have proved a little bit more than what they intended. I'm truthfully not very familiar with DNA strands or computer viruses, so I don't really know what this means, other than the fact that it's entirely possible what we perceive as our biological makeup may really just be some computer code after all. If this is the case, I'm really upset that whoever is controlling our simulation didn't just make us at least a little bit more resilient.
At number 7, experimentation. You know how it seems like the world is always on the brink of absolute chaos? Environmentally, we are always just one wrong move from ending humanity as we know it. Certainly a bit stressful for us, but maybe this is on purpose. It is possible that we may have been created as a simulation in order to help whoever created us figure out their own climate and environmental problems. It would be crazy because if they can make a simulation that feels this real, then surely they can figure out their own problems too, but that might not be necessarily true. If we really are in a simulation, they may have created us to be better at that sort of thing than they are. It is possible that if we solve enough of their problems, then they might just come back to Earth or whatever planet we end up on in order to reap the benefits from our hardworking scientists.
In our number 6 spot today, we have no evidence. This one is actually a little frustrating, to be honest, because it should be so simple. This is just the theory that it is most likely we are living in a simulation due to the fact that we absolutely cannot prove that we aren't. As much as a lot of us would like to believe that we aren't, or maybe it comes down to the fact that we can't let go of our egos enough in order to be able to believe, anything we think or any evidence we think we have would have all been simulated. If we do in fact live in a simulation, it is possible that whoever created it would prefer that we didn't come to the realization that our reality isn't ours at all. I'm not gonna lie, this whole theory is actually kind of frightening because it is most likely that we won't actually ever know the truth.
Herkimer is the small town in Iowa which supposedly vanished into thin air in 1928. The weirdness started when a guy posted about it online in 2015, saying that his mom got an email with a history of the town. Turns out it was a normal little town back in the day, but by the time aerial photos were taken in 1928, there was nothing but empty fields where Herkimer used to be. Now at first it seemed like a weird coincidence, but things only got stranger. There's a story about a tourist who drove through, got his gas topped off at the local station, then found his tank empty just a couple miles later. He was very confused but figured there was probably something wrong with his car. Anyway, he'd have to turn around and walk back to the town for help. But no matter how far he walked back, the town never got any closer. Eventually, the man was picked up by another driver along the road, but was so disturbed by what had happened, that he eventually ended up in a sanitarium. Another strange thing happened when two men from Illinois tried to buy supplies in the town. They couldn't walk up the steps of the general store because their feet just kept passing through them, like the steps weren't even there. Others tried and the same thing happened. Not long after, the local police arrived to investigate, only to find their hands passed through the doors. It was like the town was just this one big mirage, and eventually there was no sign of the town at all. The Gurdon Light in Arkansas has been a local mystery for decades. It's one of those things you can't really explain no matter how hard you try. It's a glowing light, usually white, blue, or sometimes orange, that floats near the railroad tracks in Gurdon. Unlike other mysterious lights, this one's been seen by so many people that's become a part of the town's history. The light shows up pretty regularly as well, and some folks have even seen it so often that it's just become another odd feature of the landscape. There are a couple of theories behind it. Some say it's the ghost of a railroad worker who was decapitated by a train, and his lantern still floating around as he looks for his head. Another version of the tale goes that a railroad foreman was killed by one of his workers, and again his spirit still lurks around the tracks with his lantern, creating the spooky light. Leaving aside ghosts though, there's a theory that the light could be caused by underground quartz crystals, creating some sort of electrical reaction. But whatever the cause, the Gurdon Light makes for one of the strangest mysteries in the state, along with how Arkansas is spelled. Still don't get that. The Nevada Triangle, similar to the Bermuda Triangle, is a stretch of land that just seems to suck planes out of the sky. It's found close to Area 51, and over 2,000 planes have gone missing in the region, a lot of them without a trace. One of the most famous disappearances is that of billionaire pilot Steve Fawcett in 2007. He was a super experienced pilot, but his plane vanished without a word, and it took a whole year to find the wreckage. Another story involves a military pilot who crashed in 1957, survived for nearly 2 months, and then appeared out of nowhere in a national park. Theories range from natural stuff like mountain waves messing with the planes to wilder ideas like aliens. The 2011 tsunami in Japan was one of the most devastating natural disasters ever, leaving nearly 16,000 people dead and over 2,500 missing. But what came after was stranger. In the months and years that have followed the disaster, there have been reports of ghost sightings. People would see spirits wandering the streets, asking for directions or looking for their lost homes. Some taxi drivers would also report picking up ghost passengers, people who seemed completely normal at first, but would then vanish out of the back seat before ever arriving at their destination. There were also stories of people being possessed by these lost souls, leading Buddhist monks stepping up to perform hundreds of exorcisms. Now, the Bermuda Triangle. It is the OG of mysterious patches of the planet. It's that stretch of ocean between Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico where planes and ships seem to disappear without a trace. There are all kinds of stories, some of ships vanishing with no sign, others of pilots flying into it and just losing contact. Theories for the disappearances range from the scientific, like massive underwater gas bubbles or magnetic anomalies messing with instruments, pure coincidence, to the more outlandish, like alien abductions, time warps, or in this case, glitches in the matrix that is our reality. One of the most famous cases is the disappearance of Flight 19, a group of 5 US Navy bombers that went missing in 1945 during a training mission. A rescue plane sent after them also disappeared. Despite all the theories and investigations, no one has been able to come up with a solid answer for why these disappearances happen. If this first case doesn't make you question reality just a bit, then I'm not sure what will. Anthony Hopkins had just landed the leading role in the movie adaptation The Girl from Petrovka by George Pfeiffer. Wanting to start research and familiarize himself with the character, he did what any good actor would do and decided to read the damn book. He went to London and sifted through a number of bookstores, but none of them had the novel he was looking for. Eventually, Hopkins decided he had to just head back home, but while waiting at a subway station, he happened to spot a book on a bench. Curious, he picked it up and was thrilled to realize that it was a copy of The Girl from Petrovka. I mean, what are the chances of that? Inside the book were a bunch of scribbled notes, but that was fine, it would have to do. Well, 2 years later, Hopkins was filming in Vienna, and the book's author, George Pfeiffer, visited the set one day. Hopkins struck up a conversation with Pfeiffer, who ended up telling the actor that he'd lost his own copy of his book, having given it to a friend who'd lost it somewhere in London. Hopkins was stunned to realize that the book he'd found in the London subway was the author's very own copy, filled with his handwritten notes.
Next up, we have the historic fact that it's not actually possible to prove that we are not, in fact, living in a simulation. While nuclear physicist Zora Davuti claims that we must not be living in a simulation because if we were, cosmic rays, highly energetic particles traveling through space at a speed approaching light speed, would appear as pixels rather than unbending beams. But this theory is quickly undermined when you take the words of NYU philosopher David Chalmers into account, who said that you're not going to get proof that we're not in a simulation because any evidence that we are not could be simulated. It's a paradox. But it doesn't end there. If you want to take the scientific route to disprove Davuti's definitive claim rather than the philosophical one, you can do that too. Because apparently we have already determined our universe's pixel size, and it's a Planck length, spelled P-L-A-N-C-K, which is 10 to the power of negative 20 times the size of a proton. It's really small. And it's also the point at which concepts of time and gravity no longer apply, which leads us to the conclusion that if the world is in fact a simulation, it is made up of a countless number of Planck-length pixels. Forget 4K, we're living in 400.
Operation Paul Bunyan, another story that sounds like something out of a cartoon rather than a true event from history. Back in 1976, North Korea and the United States both had troops stationed in the Korean demilitarized zone, separating North and South Korea. On August 18th of that year, a group of American soldiers went to trim a tree in the DMZ. This tree was blocking the view from a United Nations command checkpoint, and the soldiers wanted to improve visibility. But as they started trimming, North Korean soldiers confronted them and brutally attacked, killing 2 American officers with axes. So the US carried out a mission named after a legendary lumberjack, Paul Bunyan. On August 21st, 3 days after the attack, the US and South Korean forces sent a convoy of military vehicles into the DMZ, packed with armed soldiers. Overhead there were fighter jets and attack helicopters, heavy artillery was close by as well, and what were they going to do? Well, they were there to obliterate that tree. It was an over-the-top display of military might. The US troops cut down the tree, and then they calmly packed up and left. It sent a clear message that they had the power to respond with violence, but they were avoiding escalation at the same time. It sounds pretty ridiculous when you first describe it, but it actually does make a lot of sense.
Next up, we have the old Russian doll simulation theory, which is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. A simulation inside a simulation inside a simulation, and so on and so forth. The theory comes from Nick Bostrom's simulation hypothesis, which basically states that if humanity is around long enough to create convincing reality simulation technology, and if their simulated reality is around long enough to create their own convincing simulations of reality, they will. If this is truly the case, there would be countless simulated realities with only one existing base reality, making the idea of us living inside of a simulation a probability equation with a solution that states that the odds of us living inside a simulation are far more likely than the odds of us being the base reality. Not only that, but it's also highly likely that the reality that created us isn't the base reality either. We might simply just be a product of a product of a product of a product. You get the point.
So here's another historical fact that just doesn't sound real. The war on Neptune. And Neptune is not an allegory here, this was a literal war on the god of the sea. The Roman Emperor Caligula is often thought of as pretty mad. He was known for some very unpredictable behavior and wild antics, and this is a perfect example of that. He declared war on Neptune, the Roman god of the sea. He ordered his soldiers to go to the coast and collect seashells as spoils of war. That's how he intended to show Neptune who was boss. Some say he even had the soldiers slash at waves with their swords. So why the hell did he do this? Some historians think it was just a way for him to show off his military power. He was known to make some pretty grandiose gestures, and declaring war on a god fit right into his eccentric and unpredictable style.
Next up, we've got the Southern Ring Nebula, which NASA has tricked the public into believing is the performance of a dying star, when in reality, it's clearly a rendering flaw in the simulation, giving us a glimpse into the world of our creators, or so they say. But if you want to believe NASA, here's what they have to say. The phenomena is caused by the dimmer dying star sitting in the center of the image, sending out rings of gas and dust in all directions, which it has been doing for the past couple thousand years, while the brighter star next to it illuminates the appearance of the nebula, making it incredibly beautiful and almost inviting, like you want to go through it. The event, which was observed almost head-on by the James Hubble telescope, has made scientists incredibly excited because the clarity of the image is a gateway to the secrets of the nature of dying stars. But I personally think it's a gateway into the real reality, and this image is really just the Matrix begging us to escape, but okay, NASA, alright.
James Webb Telescope recently spotted a series of star clusters that may very well completely change the way we think about the history of the universe. These star clusters could be the oldest in the universe. The star clusters were found in the cosmic gems arc, which formed just 460 million years after the Big Bang. This arc, originally detected by the Hubble Space Telescope, gives us a crucial glimpse into the early stages of galaxy and star formation. The cosmic gems arc is approximately 13.3 billion light years away, but with the Webb telescope, scientists were able to pinpoint 5 massive and dense star clusters within the arc. These clusters are believed to have formed during a period of intense activity in young galaxies, contributing to the ultraviolet light emissions of their host galaxy. Unlike ancient star clusters in our Milky Way, which have survived for billions of years, these young star clusters are giving scientists insights into the early stages of star formation, which is pretty interesting.
Alright, next up we have the Carina Nebula, basically the opposite of the aforementioned Southern Ring Nebula, which shows the death of a star. The Carina Nebula is a landscape of star birth, or at least that's what NASA wants you to think. Personally, I think it looks like the early stages of landscape rendering. I mean, we've been asking for life on other planets for some time now. Maybe whoever's controlling this cosmic simulation has finally started to listen. But of course, if that line of thinking doesn't quite sit right in your simulated brain designed to reject the idea that free will doesn't actually exist, let me tell you what NASA has to say. Apparently, according to the space agency, the Carina Nebula is not proof of simulation theory, but instead it's an emerging star nursery, and the image captured by the James Webb Space Telescope shows individual stars in the Carina Nebula that were previously obscured due to cosmic dust particles. Sure.
Next up, we have unexplained light fluctuations coming from a star in the Cygnus constellation. Scientists still don't know what's causing it, but one theory is that there's an alien megastructure surrounding it. And that's not just an internet theory, that is something a number of scientists have proposed. It's often referred to as the Tabby star Dyson sphere theory. So the strange dimming was first spotted by citizen scientists throughout the Planet Hunters project, using data from the Kepler Space Telescope. Tabby star showed extreme dimming, sometimes up to 22% in brightness. Now, there are tons of ideas about why this could be happening, but the alien megastructure is, I'm sure, most of what we want to hear. This hypothetical megastructure, known as the Dyson swarm or sphere, could have been built by an advanced extraterrestrial civilization to harness the star's energy. We really don't have any solid evidence of this at this point. It's just that possibility because of the constant dimming intermittently, but there are loads of possibilities.
Next up, we have Quasar 3C273, a supermassive black hole feeding on humongous quantities of gas located in the center of the giant elliptical galaxy in the constellation of Virgo. It is also the first quasar ever identified and the optically brightest quasar discovered to date. Quasar 3C273 is incredibly powerful, capable of emitting hundreds and possibly thousands of times more energy than the entire energy output of our own galaxy, the Milky Way. Which means it probably has enough energy to power the simulation of our Milky Way and the illusion of a surrounding universe. I'm just saying, when we are looking at Quasar 3C273, we could actually be looking at the computer that made us.
Finally, we have Bernardinelli Bernstein, which is a really big comet that's been detected. Really, really big. In fact, it's called a megacomet. Stuff like this makes me kind of wish we were living in a simulation. Speaking of simulations, is it Bernardinelli Bernstein or Bernstein? I don't know if anyone's gonna get that joke. But anyway, the thing is headed in our direction and will make its closest approach in 2031. Luckily, it'll pass us by about 1 billion miles, which is good because it's 100,000 times more massive than your average comet, measuring 85 miles across. Just a reminder how it's not really as empty up there as it looks most of the time.
Number 5, glitches in the Matrix. So with all computers, there can be technical difficulties, including glitches. Now many people believe there are real-life glitches, proving we're in a simulation. These glitches are events that seem comparable to the effects of errors in computer programs or their execution. Some examples of these include objects vanishing and sometimes reappearing, people being seen by different witnesses at different locations at the same time, or not being seen in places where they should be, aka people vanishing often for a considerable amount of times, often with multiple searches, then reappearing and claiming that they have never left the spot. Also, changes in everyday familiar objects and time slips and time freezes, where people interact with different time periods, or where they observe all movement and noises cease over a relatively short or larger area. Now, some glitches have been caught on camera, and one very popular glitch that has been documented lately is girls finding a nail that has broken off, matching their same nail color / design in their room, but they are not missing any nails. So where did the broken nail come from? No one knows, but it freaks me out. Number 4, doppelgangers. A doppelganger is a biologically unrelated lookalike or a double of a living person. As you might have heard, there are 7 other versions of you in this world. Now, a study of lookalikes, unrelated people with faces so similar they could pass for identical twins, has found that such pairs share genetic traits. Scientists study 32 pairs of individuals with uncanny similar headshots who are a part of a long-running project by a Canadian photographer to document these faux twins. The 16 pairs found by computer analysts who have the most similar features also share more genetic variants than the less similar pairs, the researchers concluded. Now, that's not a huge surprise because researchers are already using genetics to predict face shape. The twins do not share DNA methylation patterns, chemical marks controlling gene expression that are shaped by our environment, reinforcing the dominant role DNA alone plays in determining our appearance. Number 3, Stephen Hawking's death. Now, Stephen Hawking is regarded as one of the most brilliant theoretical physicists in history. His work on the origins of the structure of the universe, from the Big Bang to black holes, revolutionized the field. Now, Stephen was seen by many as the world's smartest person, though he never revealed his IQ score. Now, as Stephen himself would tell you, time is relative, but that doesn't quite explain why his death occurred on what many consider a fairly significant day. It happened on Albert Einstein's 139th birthday, Galileo's 300th death day, and Pi Day, March 14th, where the date reads 314. Coincidence? I think not. Number 2, philosophers. Now, throughout history, some of the world's most notable thinkers have laid out their own questions and ideas about why reality may not be exactly what it seems. According to Built-In, a significant number of people regard the simulation hypotheses as a modern offshoot of Plato's The Republic, or more specifically, the well-known allegory of the cave. In a nutshell, the scholar's allegory features cave prisoners drawing conclusions about reality from the shadows of puppets they can't actually see. Basically, a prisoner who sees the shadow cast by a book may think and draw assumptions from that shadow about what a book really is, but can only learn the truth if he breaks free and sees the actual book with his own eyes. He isn't the only philosopher though, as another example is from 1641, when philosopher René Descartes presented the idea of an evil demon powerful enough to create an illusion that looks and feels like reality. So if these people thought this, and they have advanced technologies like computers, is it just a coincidence, or is it more? And coming in at number 1 is Violet Jessup, aka Miss Unsinkable. Violet Jessup has some horrible luck, or great luck, however you want to look at it. In 1911, she began working as a stewardess for the White Star liner RMS Olympic.
Violet was on board September 20th, 1911, when Olympic left from Southampton and collided with the British warship HMS Hawke. Now, despite the damage, the ship was able to make it back to port without sinking. She continued to work on the Olympic until April 1912, when she was transferred to the sister ship Titanic. Violet boarded the RMS Titanic as a stewardess on April 10th, 1912 at age 24. 4 days later, on April 14th, it struck an iceberg in the North Atlantic and sank about 2 hours and 40 minutes after the collision. She was later ordered into lifeboat 16, and as the boat was being lowered, one of Titanic's officers gave her a baby to look after. The next morning, Violet and the rest of the survivors were rescued by the RMS Carpathia and taken to New York City on April 18th. Then, in the First World War, Violet was a stewardess for the British Red Cross, and on the morning of November 21st, 1916, she was aboard HMHS Britannic, the younger sister ship of Olympic and Titanic that had been converted into a hospital ship when it sank in the Aegean Sea after an unexplained explosion. Britannic sank within 55 minutes, ending the lives of 30 of the 1,066 people on board. British authorities hypothesized that the ship had either been struck by a torpedo or got hit by a mine planted by German forces. Now, it's incredible that she survived all 3 incidents without getting injured, and she ended up dying at 83 of congestive heart failure in 1971. It had nothing to do with boats.
We have a never-before-seen deep space radio signal detected in 2023. The radio signal comes in the form of an FRB, a fast radio burst, which is a bright flash of radio light that lasts for only a few milliseconds before disappearing altogether. The fascinating thing about this particular radio burst is that 1, it comes from far beyond our own galaxy, and 2, it is highly active and frequently repeats itself, meaning its behavior is incredibly different from any other FRB observed to date. Sophia Scheich, lead author of the discovery, was quoted saying, "This work is exciting because it provides both confirmation of known FRB properties and the discovery of some new ones." The FRB was observed 35 times by Scheich and other scientists over a 2-month period, with each burst coming from the exact same unknown source. And an unusual pattern emerged in the bursts when observed for an extended period of time. Usually, reoccurring FRBs get lower in pitch as they go. This one, however, is different. The pitch goes up and down with each burst. Scientists believe the bursts are coming from a neutron star called magnetar, the core of a dead star with an incredibly strong magnetic field. And they're probably right, but on the other hand, perhaps it's a signal coming from beyond our cosmic simulation, proving that none of this is really real.
Next up, we have a very recently detected radio signal that has NASA scientists pretty confused. It's a repeating radio signal from deep space that cycles every 53.8 minutes. It's been dubbed ASKAP J1935 plus 2148. It's coming from a neutron star about 15,820 light years away. Neutron stars are incredibly dense remnants of massive stars that have collapsed in on themselves. According to Dr. Manisha Caleb, an astrophysicist involved in the study, what's strange about this discovery is the slow pace of the signal. Most radio signals from neutron stars are a lot more rapid. Astronomers used the Australian Square Kilometre Array Pathfinder, or the ASKAP radio telescope, to detect and study the signal. They found that it has 3 distinct emission states, each with its own set of characteristics. So, what is causing the strange behavior of the signal? Too soon to know.
Next up, we have the space roar. Subtle, right? Now, as a general rule, there is no sound in space, but of course, when science, engineering, and mechanics all intertwine, we are still able to pick up sounds when using the right tools, which is exactly what happened in 2006 when scientists used a listening instrument tied to a balloon 23 miles high to pick up a signal that was 6 times louder than anything they could have ever expected. Like, honestly, they were shocked and confused, but overall incredibly excited. Before the transmission came through, scientists had expected to observe the sounds of an early star, but after hearing the transmission, an early star being the origin of the sound was pretty much entirely ruled out. Now the theory is that the combined radio emission from distant galaxies created the sound, but of course that's just a theory. In reality, scientists really have no idea. But not knowing the sound's origin is not the only problem the signal has raised. There is also the fear that the volume of the signal will interfere with efforts made to search for signals coming from the first stars that formed from the Big Bang. Of course, the obvious theory jumps out. Could the space roar be an attempt at keeping us from revealing the truth about the universe? Discovering that it's all just one big cosmic simulation, you know? Or is it yelling at us, begging us to look into it more so we can discover that this is all just one big cosmic simulation?
The James Webb Telescope may just be able to spot intelligent life out in space, and not in the way you may be thinking. It has to do with greenhouse gases. So a recent study from the University of California, Riverside, suggests that we might detect alien civilizations by spotting the artificial greenhouse gases on their terraformed planets. Terraforming involves modifying a planet to make it habitable, and certain gases like fluorinated methane, ethane, and propane would be telltale signs that this was going on. These gases don't occur naturally in large amounts, but could be used by sentient life to warm up their planets. Edward Schweiderman, an astrobiologist leading the study, says, quote, "These gases would be good for a civilization that perhaps wanted to forestall an impending ice age or terraform an otherwise uninhabitable planet in their system, as humans have proposed for Mars." So the James Webb can detect the infrared signatures produced by these gases, which can survive in atmospheres for up to 50,000 years. So no, nothing's been spotted yet, but it is something they're keeping their eyes open for. Lake Vostok is a weird one. It's this massive freshwater lake that's been trapped beneath Antarctica's ice for millions of years. Scientists first found it in the 70s, but it's believed to have been sealed off by 3 kilometers or about 2 miles of ice for around 15 million years. At one point, Lake Vostok was pretty much a regular lake on the surface of Antarctica, and it would rise and fall with the tides, just like any other body of water. But now, it's deep beneath the ice with a crazy amount of pressure, about 5,150 pounds per square inch, just sitting there in total darkness. Even though it's buried under all that ice, scientists are convinced that there's life down there. They think organisms have been evolving in complete isolation, untouched by the outside world for all of this time. How they're still thriving in that dark, high-pressure environment is a mystery, and while it'd be wild to see what the lake would have looked like in the past, I'm also dying to know what kind of weird life forms could be living down there right now. Socotra Island is one of the strangest places on Earth. It's found off the coast of Yemen, and it doesn't look like any place on the planet. The island is very remote, and because of that, it's home to some very strange stuff. About a third of its plant life can't be found anywhere else in the world. One of the most bizarre plants is the dragon's blood tree. It's got these branches that look upside down, kind of like a tree, but growing with its roots sticking out of the ground and at the top. These trees have been used for medicinal purposes, dyeing fabric, making incense, and staining wood. And then there's the island's bottle tree, which has a thick trunk that stores water to survive the harsh conditions. You'll also find huge limestone caves here filled with bats, and you'll also find messages carved into the walls by sailors from 1 to 6 CE. The people who live here are also pretty unique, with genetic traits that can't be found anywhere else on the planet. In North Carolina, there is a spot known as the Devil's Stomping Ground. It's this barren 40-foot wide circle in the middle of the woods, and a lot of very weird stuff is said to go on here. The legend goes that the devil himself stomps around in this circle every night before heading off to do his evil deeds. The ground inside the circle is weirdly barren. There's no plants. No plants will grow there, and anything left inside the circle during the day will mysteriously be thrown out by the next morning. People have tried to spend the night in the circle as well, but many say it feels off. Scientists aren't sure what's going on, but there's been some speculation about the soil's copper or salt content causing the plants to die, but testing hasn't really given any clear answers here. What's also incredibly strange is that compasses seem to go haywire when you're standing in the circle. There's a noticeable magnetic interference. If you look at maps from the 1700s, you'll see an island called Bermeja off the coast of Mexico. It was shown as a key piece of land for Mexico's territorial claims, especially when it came to oil drilling in the Gulf of Mexico. Well, look at a map today, and you won't be able to find the place. The island just doesn't seem to exist anymore. In 2009, a study by the National Autonomous University of Mexico tried to find it using everything from aerial reconnaissance to underwater sensors, but they couldn't locate the island anywhere. It was supposed to be about 55 nautical miles outside Mexico's territorial waters, which would have given them a big chunk of extra oil-rich land, but it wasn't there. Your first thought is that the island was probably just swallowed up by the sea, but others believe the island's disappearance might have been something more intentional, like maybe it was bombed by the US to limit Mexico's claims on the Gulf. There are all kinds of conspiracy theories surrounding it, but till this day, we still don't know for sure. Minnesota is home to one of the most bizarre waterfalls in the United States, Devil's Kettle Falls. The Brule River splits into two channels, one of which continues on as a regular waterfall, but the other one, well, the second stream disappears into this giant pothole known as the Devil's Kettle, and no one knows where the water goes. It just vanishes without a trace. Some say it's bottomless and that the water drops all the way down into hell, and while it's a fun theory, scientists, of course, don't think that. They think the water might actually flow underground, rejoining the Brule River a little further downstream, but it's impossible to see with the naked eye. The thing is, no one's been able to prove where that water actually goes, and after decades of research, the Devil's Kettle is still just a weird little oddity we don't fully understand, which obviously means our entire reality may be just a simulation, of course.
At number 5, it's all a joke. Sometimes things just happen in our world that are just weird. Who could have predicted that Donald Trump would become president? Or the time that the Patriots were down 28-3 in the Super Bowl and came back to win the whole game? Or that weird Oscars envelope mix-up that was just really, really awkward. Anyway, this is all to say that weird things happen in our world all the time. Some things that no one quite saw coming and quite honestly seem kind of strange. This theory goes that whoever made our simulation may just want to have a little bit of fun. Or maybe our simulation is malfunctioning and they're trying to get us back on track. Either way, this could be an explanation for those weird things that just seem to happen.
In our number 4 spot today, we have the Goldilocks zone. You know how we are located in such a great spot in our solar system? Just far enough from the sun that we don't absolutely burn up, but close enough that the sun helps sustain our life. This is what is commonly referred to as the Goldilocks zone, since it is just right. This lends well into the idea that we live in a simulation because of the fact that whoever created us most likely wants us to be able to survive, so of course they would place us in the most ideal location for life. I would definitely like to ask them why they made the sun so harmful as well, because that seems like an oversight, but I am willing to look past it for now, considering there isn't anything I can do to change that.
At number 3, math is a lie. You know how we have rules, like the laws of physics, or just the scientific and mathematical rules that our world just seems to follow that we had to figure out? Well, some people believe that those laws are proof of us living in a simulation. If we lived in a video game, at some point we would also discover that there are rigid rules that cannot be broken no matter how hard you tried, almost like it is mathematical or scientific. So something like the speed of light, which is the fastest rate a particle can travel in our world, might just be the time it takes to transmit information in our simulation. All of the rules we think we've figured out might just be more proof that we do indeed live in a simulation.
In our number 2 spot today, we have our own simulations. This one has to do with what we are doing that could possibly prove the existence of a simulation. As humans, we are getting better and better at creating our own simulations. In 2014, the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics connected 8,000 computers to create a 350 million light-year simulation of our universe and digitally aged it over 13 billion years. Or, for a more simple example, let's take The Sims. This franchise sold over 125 million copies in its first decade, so it shows that we are absolutely interested in creating our own simulations. If we are this interested in it, why would we assume that whatever other forms of life exist out there aren't also as interested as we are? This one might make you think next time before you decide to delete the ladder to get out of the swimming pool in your Sims world.
And finally, at number 1, we are the simulation. This one is pretty simple, but also might be a little little confusing. We all live in our own reality and no two are the same. Whatever we perceive in the world is slightly simulated by our own brains. What I mean by this is that we use our past and our memories to process information that we are currently receiving, whether we do it consciously or not. Who is to say that anything we see looks the same to anyone else, or anything we taste tastes the same to anyone else? We all live in our own little world, and that in itself might be proof that we are in a simulation. There is no true reality that we share 100%. It is all based on the individual.
The tectonic strain theory suggests that before an earthquake, stress builds up in the Earth's crust and releases low-frequency electromagnetic waves. And there's this idea that these EM waves can interfere with the human nervous system, causing hallucinations, nausea, and feelings of dread. In some places, people report glowing lights in the sky or buzzing sounds, ghost-like visions, often just days or even hours before a quake. This becomes especially interesting when you look at reports of paranormal activity clustered along fault lines. The idea is that what people interpret as a supernatural thing might actually be a side effect of EM energy hitting their brains in just the right way. Researchers like Michael Persinger have tried to replicate these effects in a lab using electromagnetic stimulation to induce hallucinations and feelings of a presence in volunteers. But how does this connect to reality being a simulation? Well, if our brains can be manipulated this easily, it does raise the question, how stable is our perception of reality at all? If tectonic strain can change what we see or feel, then reality might be less solid than we think, and more like code reacting to pressure. There's a group of scientists who've been running a weird experiment for years. They set up a bunch of machines all over the world called random number generators, basically devices that spit out completely random strings of numbers. But during major world events like terror attacks or big natural disasters, they found that patterns tend to show up in the number generators. They start acting less random. Now, is this just a coincidence, or, in theory, could our collective emotions somehow be influencing the numbers? Statistically, this shouldn't happen, but it keeps happening. Enough that it's made a bunch of researchers seriously wonder if human consciousness could have an effect on physical systems. So what does this mean? Well, if the world around us really is a simulation, this phenomenon could make sense. Often in games or programs, when too many users interact at once, the system can glitch or lag. Maybe when billions of people are emotionally focused on the same thing, it's messing with the simulation's background processes. Reality itself could start to wobble a little, and those numbers that are supposed to be randomly spat out could start showing patterns. There's this shortwave radio signal people have been hearing on and off since the late 90s. Nobody knows where it's coming from, and it doesn't send voices, numbers, or anything you can actually decode. It just plays weird, distorted tones that sound almost like music in reverse, or like someone messing with a cassette tape. Take a listen. This is why people started calling it the backwards music station. It doesn't have a schedule, a name, or any kind of pattern. It'll just suddenly start broadcasting for hours, then vanish again. What's strange is that it shows up on frequencies close to those old numbers stations from the Cold War, the ones spies used to get coded instructions. But this one doesn't seem to be trying to say anything. There's no rhythm, no breaks, no ID. Some radio hobbyists think it might be some kind of military tech bleeding through, like signals meant for submarines or secret communications systems. Others think it could be a data signal, but in a format that nobody recognizes. But if the world really is a simulation, maybe it's not meant for anyone at all. Maybe it's part of the system itself, some leftover noise leaking into our reality. So here's something NASA still can't explain. When certain spacecraft fly past Earth to gain speed, what's called a gravity assist, they sometimes come out of the maneuver going just a little bit faster or slower than expected. Not by much, just a few millimeters per second, but in space, that's a big deal, and nobody knows why it happens. But it's happened to multiple probes over the years, Galileo, NEAR, Rosetta, and others. The math is solid going in, But after the flyby, they check the data and they're like, what? That shouldn't have happened. Even after ruling out stuff like equipment error. Now, in a simulated world, this makes a strange kind of sense. Maybe the flyby is forcing the physics engine to recalculate on the fly, and it doesn't always do it perfectly. Like a video game that lags when a player moves too fast past a boundary. The laws stay consistent until something brushes up against the edge of the system. Sometimes people dream about places they've never been, only to later stumble across them in real life. This sounds kind of made up, but one of the most widely discussed cases comes from a man named Chris Robinson, sometimes referred to as the Dream Detective. He claims to have had precognitive dreams that helped him find real-world locations, ones he'd never visited in real life before. In one case, he dreamed about a strange courtyard with archways, a fountain, and specific stonework. Later, while traveling in Italy, he walked into a courtyard that perfectly matched his dream, down to the placement of objects. He insists he'd never seen it before, not even in a photo or a movie. Of course, there are plenty of skeptics and possible logical explanations, but it is interesting. I mean, so many of us have had experiences like this, specific things happening in dreams that eerily play out in real life. Are we just pulling from subconscious memories, or are we tapping into something deeper, like data bleeding from one layer of a simulation into another? The double slit experiment. This one's famous for a reason. It messes with the very idea of reality. Here's my attempt to explain it. So you fire tiny particles like electrons or photons at a barrier with two slits, and then watch what hits the wall behind it. If you don't measure which slit the particles go through, it behaves like a wave interfering with itself, creating this striped pattern like ripples in water. But the second you observe it, even passively, it snaps back to behaving like a solid particle, and the interference pattern vanishes. To put it simply, when you watch what happens, it changes the outcome. That shouldn't really happen. Nothing in normal physics says a particle should care or behave any differently just because it's being watched, but yet somehow this happens. In a simulated world though, this is exactly what you'd expect. Think about how video games work. The game doesn't fully render areas the player isn't looking at. It saves processing power. Now, imagine reality does the same thing. Until something is observed, it stays in a kind of maybe state. But once you look, the simulation decides what it should be. There's a theory called biocentrism, and it flips everything we thought we knew about reality on its head. Instead of life being a byproduct of the universe, it says that the universe exists because of life. In other words, without consciousness, there's no reality. It sounds like stoner philosophy, but this was actually proposed by scientist Dr. Robert Lanza, and when you look at how quantum physics behaves, it kind of makes sense. This kind of connects to the double slit experiment that we just talked about. The second you measure or observe a particle, it changes just by looking at it. Biocentrism says our consciousness isn't stuck inside the universe, it's actually shaping it, like your awareness is writing the code as you go. If that's true, then maybe everything you see around you, time, space, matter, it only exists because you're here to witness it, as if the simulation doesn't run until a player logs in. Let's talk about the smallest thing in the universe, like the absolute tiniest. It's called the Planck length, about 100 millionth of a trillionth of a centimeter. So small, it's basically nothing. According to physics, you can't look any smaller than this. Try to zoom in past it and the math just breaks. Reality gets fuzzy, like a pixelated image that you just zoomed too far in. Now ask yourself, why would reality need to have a smallest possible unit at all? If the universe was truly infinite, there'd be no reason for this lower limit. But if it's running on some kind of engine, if this is all just a simulation, then there has to be a smallest building block. You can't render infinity. Things like the speed of light, gravity, and Planck's constant all tie into this, just like how game developers limit how far you can zoom in or how fast you can move to keep the whole thing from falling apart. So if there's a smallest pixel of space and time, could it mean that we're inside something artificial? If you take a step back and really look at the world, it becomes obvious something weird is going on with the math. Patterns are everywhere. Spiral galaxies, sunflowers, hurricane formations, seashells. All of them follow the Fibonacci sequence, a series of numbers that pop up again and again in nature. The golden ratio shows up in everything from the shape of your face to the structure of galaxies. Then there's fractals, patterns that repeat themselves no matter how far you zoom in or out. Trees, rivers, lightning, lungs, all following mathematical blueprints. Nature is ruled by math, and that's kind of strange because if the universe is random and chaotic, why does it keep producing neat, repeating formulas? If everything works like code, maybe it's because it is code. Video games, everything from movement to rendering to environment is built on math. And maybe the real world is no different. What we're seeing as natural beauty could just be the visual expression code. Time isn't as solid as you think. In fact, it bends. That's what Einstein's theory of relativity says, and we've proven it. If you go fast enough or sit in a strong enough gravitational field, time literally ticks slower for you. This isn't science fiction. Astronauts living on the International Space Station age slightly slower than we do here on Earth. GPS satellites wouldn't even work if they didn't account for time dilation, so time moves differently depending on where you are and how fast you're going. Almost like the system is prioritizing certain areas over others. Sound familiar? It should. A game engine puts most of its power into rendering what's right in front of the player. The stuff in the distance, lower quality, slower loading. Maybe not even there until you get closer. Could our universe be doing the same thing? Maybe reality runs faster in some places and slows down in others to save on processing.
JFK and Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln and JFK have some uncanny similarities, and it freaks me out. They were both elected to Congress 100 years apart in 1846 and 1946 respectively. They both became president 14 years later in 1860, 1960, and both died by a fatal gunshot wound to the head and were succeeded by a man named Johnson who, wouldn't you know, just so happened to be born 100 years apart. Add to that some other coincidences like them dying on a Friday, their family names containing 7 letters, and the fact that they were both famous for their civil rights efforts, and you've got 2 presidents cut from an eerily similar cloth. So what does this mean? I don't know, but it sure is freaky. Number 9. The Jim twins. When 2 twin boys were put up for adoption in 1940 at only 3 weeks old, their adoptive parents coincidentally named them both James. Both men came to be named Jim for short, and that was just the start of it. The two would grow up only 40 miles apart from each other and live similar lives. They grew up without any contact with one another, and when they finally did meet at the age of 39, the similarities between their lives were scary. Both had beloved childhood dogs named Toy, and as school children both had a proclivity for math and woodworking, but weren't great at spelling. As adults, they both were married twice, first to a woman named Linda, then to a woman named Betty. Now when they had sons, they both named them James Allen. They were both smokers, drove Chevys, and even chose to vacation at the same Florida beach. Now on February 9th, 1979, the Jim twins were finally reunited. When their fascinating case came to light, scientists saw how very valuable they could be to the study of reunited twins. They took part in a study conducted by Dr. Thomas Bocard of the University of Minnesota, who found that their medical histories and brainwave tests were almost identical. So too were the results in personality tests. How strange is that? Sounds to me that they were programmed the exact same way. Number 8. Double slit experiment. In physics' famous double slit experiments, electrons are fired at a photosensitive screen through slits in a copper plate, usually producing an interference pattern that indicates wave-like behavior. Now this type of experiment was first performed by Thomas Young in 1801 as a demonstration of the wave behavior of visible light. Now at the time it was thought that the light consisted of either waves or particles, but with the beginning of modern physics about 100 years later, it was realized that light could in fact show behavior characteristics of both waves and particles. Some have taken this to mean our simulation is conserving its resources and rendering certain things only when it knows we're looking at them. So does this mean anything? I'm not sure, but it is something to consider. Number 7. Mandela effect. The Mandela effect is an observed phenomenon in in which a large segment of the population misremembers a significant event or shares a memory of an event that did not actually occur. Fiona Broom, a paranormal researcher, coined the term to describe collective false memory when she discovered that a significant number of people at a conference she was attending in 2010 shared a memory that Nelson Mandela had died in prison during the 1980s. In fact, the former president of South Africa was released from prison in 1990 and was very much alive at the time of the conference. Now, this has caused an uproar on the internet with people discussing their experiences. For example, some people remember Mr. Monopoly wearing a monocle when he wasn't, Kit Kat with a dash in the middle, the Berenstain Bears or the Berenstein Bears, whichever you believe, and plenty more. Now, is this an accidental glitch in what we're remembering? Was it done on purpose? I don't think we'll ever know. Number 6. The Goldilocks Zone. In astronomy and astrobiology, the circumstellar habitable zone, CHZ, or simply the habitable zone, is the range of orbits around a star within which a planetary surface can support liquid water given sufficient atmospheric pressure. The habitable zone is also called the Goldilocks Zone, a metaphor allusion to the children's fairy tale of the Goldilocks and the Three Bears, in which a little girl chooses from sets of 3 items, ignoring the ones that are too extreme, too large or small, or too hot or cold, and settling on the one in the middle, which is just right. Earth exists in what astrobiologists call a Goldilocks zone, close enough to a star that greenhouse gases can trap heat to keep liquid water, but far enough that the planet does not become a hothouse. People believe that us living in such an orbital sweet spot is circumstantial evidence for a simulation. And let me say, if we were in a simulation, this would be the perfect place to keep us humans.
Okay, we'll kick this part 2 off on a lighter note. This one gets a little dark, so we'll ease our way in, you know? The twins named Jim. Okay, that sounds like a 2026 comedy hit already. Back in 1979, a set of twins were reunited when they were 39 years old at the time. This was of course a big moment in their lives. For 37 years, they barely knew of each other's existence. Then when they finally met, the long-lost twins had more in common than they could have ever thought. For starters, both had been named Jim. I spoiled that in the fun title earlier, but their adoptive parents both named the lads Jim. That's insane. Jim? Like of all names, really? And both Jims just happened to love math and carpentry. Both also had jobs and security, and both also had ex-wives named Linda. And they both since married a woman named Betty. This isn't like, what? Imagine meeting another you, and he's like, oh yeah, I also love knitting and Autobots. What are the odds? No, that's too eerie. You're an alien clone. Something's afoot here. Get out of here. Not just meeting a long-lost twin at 40. No way. Number 9, Stephen Hawking. Time is relative and fascinating and all that confusing stuff. There's so many components of our universe that we still don't even understand. James Webb is out here making people turn to atheists all of a sudden. The universe is bigger than we all think, yet somehow it still gives us these once-in-a-lifetime coincidences. Or as I say, coincidence. Stephen Hawking's death occurred on Einstein's 139th birthday, which is also Galileo's 300th death day, and also Pi Day. This was March 14th. My dad has the same birthday as Daniel Radcliffe, and they're both wizards, so I don't know. Just saying. These birthday coincidences are getting out of hand. Coincidences. There it is, he's got it. Number 8, atomic survivor. On August 6th and 9th, 1945, the United States detonated 2 nuclear explosives over the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This, of course, was devastating. The results in this reaction, the blast and the radiation they both caused, took the lives of nearly 90,000 people. It was horrible. But in 2009, the Japanese government confirms that there was at least 1 man who was in each city on both days of the reactions, and he lived to tell the tale. On August 6th, Satomu Yamaguchi was in Hiroshima on a business trip. As I was walking alone, I heard the sound of a plane. Just one, he told a British newspaper. I looked up into the sky and I saw the B-29 and it dropped 2 parachutes. I was looking up into the sky at them and suddenly it was like a flash of magnesium, a great flash in the sky, and I was blown over just like that. And by August 9th, he had returned home to Nagasaki only to experience the trauma for a second time. Despite the double radiation exposure, Yamaguchi lived to be 93 years old, which is incredible. He sadly passed away from stomach cancer. Number 7, Julianne Kopka. Miss Julianne has a 2-for-1 when it comes to survival stories. I had to include it. Her story starts out on Christmas Eve, a lovely day, 1971, when she was just a teenager and she was on Lanza Flight 508. Now the plane was struck by lightning, which is an actual nightmare situation that I didn't know could happen, and this led to the plane starting to disintegrate midair. I don't even, yeah, Yeah, it was all bad. In what felt like the blink of an eye for Julianne, she found herself still strapped to her seat 2 miles above the Peruvian rainforest. She was injured, of course, full of bruises, a broken collarbone, but she was alive after she landed. And in fact, she was the only person who had been on the flight that was still alive. Just fell out of a plane and lived to tell. That is crazy. That is bat insane. But it's like you're out of the fire into the frying pan at this point, right? Now you're in the wilderness all alone with no food, just, a little bit of candy, if anything, from the plane. Julianne had found a small stream which she began to wade in downstream. She traveled along it, and the insects in the jungle were eating her alive, and sorry, this next part is gross, but maggots had infected her arm. It was like bad, worse, even worse. Now we're flowing down a river and maggots are eating me. This is incredible. Julianne ended up coming across a sort of encampment where she found a few supplies, and she was so smart and was able to give herself a little bit of first aid, which included pouring gasoline on the infected arm, which then led to all the, disgusting bugs and maggots leaving it. Because they're like, hey, I'm not a fan of gasoline, lunch is over, see you later. And then just a few hours later, a few lumber workers found her, and they gave her more first aid treatment and took her to an area that was more populated, where she was then airlifted for medical treatment. Now, in 2000, her story was told through the documentary titled Wings of Hope, which was directed by Werner Herzog, who particularly took interest in the story because, one, it's obviously incredible, as I was just explaining it. I read this and I'm like, it's crazy. But two, Werner Herzog also had a seat booked on that flight, and he would have been on that same flight if it wasn't for a last minute change of plans. I can't even, that should be number 1, really. Number 6, Comet family. Okay, this one's good. The odds of being hit or killed by a meteor are 1 in 2 million, or something like that, right? It's crazy. But even so, back in 1954, residents in Talladega County, Alabama, noticed a ball of fire heading towards the Earth. Now, back then we didn't have Twitter, right? We couldn't warn anybody that a meteor was possibly gonna hit us. We also really didn't know if it was gonna hit or not, or how big it was, so it was alarming. Especially for Anne Elizabeth Hodges, who got hit by said space rock. Yeah, she only got grazed, but with these odds, it's still possible. Wild. Now, cut to recent history, the Comet family in France. Their house was hit by a meteor. I'll say that again. The Comet family was hit by a... You get it, there we go. As somebody with the last name McWaters, I'm a little worried that I might drown now. I don't know. Last names seem to be a little bit of a tip-off, it seems. And number 5, World Cup. An episode from The Simpsons back in 1997 called The Cartridge Family shows Mexico and Portugal going head-to-head in football. Like soccer football, not like football, you get it. Springfield residents are told to go see this match to determine which nation is the greatest on Earth, Mexico or Portugal. So when the 2018 World Cup then rolled around much later, pun intended, fans were excited that this was now coming true, but at the same time had a laugh determining that Ronaldo must have missed that penalty intentionally so that the prediction would come true. That's like the theory now, that Ronaldo missed to make The Simpsons correct. A lot of theories for that one, it's always fun. But recently it's been announced that Qatar will host a tournament in November and December 2022 rather than usual June-July dates. Another World Cup, another chance for The Simpsons to add another prediction to their already impressive list. That's a creepy show. I have another Simpsons one coming up, but we'll see.
Next up, we've got some quirky code, or should I say some computer code in our quarks. For those of you who don't know what quarks are, they're a type of elementary particle that are absolutely fundamental to the existence of matter. Matter being pretty much anything that exists in this universe other than light, sound, heat, energy, gravity, and time. So yeah, quarks are pretty important, especially to theoretical physicist James Gates, who claims to have found literal computer code embedded in equations relating to string theory. String theory being an incredibly complicated scientific theory that I will now attempt to explain to you in just a few short sentences. Basically, string theory says that absolutely everything in this universe is connected, and that the universe is made up of and connected by tiny vibrating strings that are smaller than the smallest subatomic particles, which are really small and include quarks. Now, back to how this all proves simulation theory. While studying an equation about quarks, electrons, and supersymmetry, Gates discovered a computer code embedded in the mathematical equation, but not just any computer code. He discovered an error correcting code, the same code that is used to make web browsers work. I'll say it again, the same code used to make web browsers work was discovered in an equation pertaining to the literal building blocks of our universe. If that doesn't get you thinking, I throw my hands up. I really don't know what will.
Alright, Mark Twain, the famous author of classics like The Adventures of Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn, he made a really eerie prediction about his very own death. It's one of those stories that makes you wonder if there's certain things about reality that science just doesn't fully understand. Twain was born in 1835. That same year, Halley's Comet, which only comes around once every 76 years, made an appearance in the sky. Twain thought that this was pretty significant. He was so struck by the timing that he made a bold prediction later in his life. He said, "I came in with Halley's Comet. It is coming again next year. The Almighty has said, no doubt. Now there are these two unaccountable freaks. They came in together. They must go out together." And he really did seem genuinely convinced that his life was somehow connected to the comet. You could even say the two were intertwined. Well, he ended up being right. Halley's Comet came back in 1910, and Twain died on April 21st, just one day after the comet's closest approach to Earth. April 21st, also my birthday.
Next up, let's take a short break from breaking our brains with complicated theories, philosophical prompts, and math, and instead break our brains with something else. Pictures, like this one of two benches, a clear example of a simulation glitch, copy and pasting code. Not convinced? How about these guys? Or these ladies? Or these two cars that clearly shouldn't both exist, why are they parked next to each other? Or this copy and pasted cat. Or how about this glitch? These photos were taken just moments apart, but something is very different about them. If you look closely, you will notice that in the first photograph, the little girl is missing maybe 2 teeth on the bottom row of her mouth. Now look at the next photo. All of a sudden, her bottom teeth have reappeared, and now her top ones are missing. It's just too weird. Honestly, it might hurt your brain less just to chalk it up to computer error. I don't know. Let's move on. James?
All those images reminded me of a time I'd come out of a Jackassers with my cousin, and we were walking through the parking lot, and all of the cars were white. Like literally every second, it was like, holy crap. It was like one of those times in a video game where it seems like things just haven't rendered fully yet. It was weird. Next, I want to talk about the dancing plague of 1518, which I know has been talked about to death, but could this unexplained event in history actually be an example of a glitch in the Matrix? I mean, it's talked about a lot for a reason. It's one of the strangest and most mysterious incidents in history. For the few of you who are unfamiliar though, in July of 1518 in France, a woman stepped into the street and started dancing. And dancing and dancing, she just kept going. It went from strange but kind of endearing to a bit concerning. Hours then turned into days, and even more strangely, others started joining in. Within a week, dozens of people were dancing in the streets. They danced day and night without rest or food. Some danced until they collapsed from exhaustion. And horrifyingly, the dancers looked terrified. It was like they were being controlled like puppets by some unseen force, and the dancing spread. More and more people started joining in, seemingly unable to control their movements. Eventually, after several weeks of this, the dancing stopped, as mysteriously as it began. Those who survived were left in shock and were confused. They had no clear explanation for why they'd started dancing.
And finally, we have the fact that in 2017, a multidisciplinary group of researchers working at the University of Washington proved that computer code could literally be embedded into a person's physical strands of DNA, which obviously has led to a crap ton of people seriously questioning whether or not what we perceive as biological reality has been just computer code all along. The technology is incredibly advanced, so advanced that it is likely that in the next decade we could see coding DNA becoming a common global practice. What implications does this have in regard to simulation theory? Well, perhaps the reason that we were able to embed code into and alter the code of our DNA in the first place is because it was already code in the first place. Think about it.
Number 4, Mars life. We're back. There it is. There's the next Simpson one. That fast. There we go. Let me ask you lovely people a question. If you could go to Mars right now with like 3 of your friends, would you do it? Keep in mind, it's really boring. And unless you're an astronaut botanist like Matt Damon, you'll probably have a rough go. But in the future, would you do it? I would. I'd go. I'd go with like one person, you know? Force too many, that's too much. Going to Mars might be as simple as going to the mall. Apparently, The Simpsons have an episode where they show a family visit to the big red planet come 2051. But honestly, I feel like we're gonna get there a lot sooner. SpaceX is already planning to send people out there. It's a quick, 9-month trip, so make sure your phone's charged. But it's actually more beneficial for the team to travel during these peak times in the 2030s and in the 2050s. Because during these years, trips to the planet will be shorter and they'll coincide with periods of the solar maximum. So while this one may or may not come true in 2022, well, let me tell you, it's right around the corner. Or maybe in 2050. Who knows? Number 3, Titanic inspection card. This inspection card once belonged to a woman named Marion Meanwell. And you're probably thinking, what could possibly be worrisome or, creepy about an inspection card? Well, it shows how Marion was not intended to be on the Titanic that fateful day, but by some turn of events, she unfortunately found herself as one of the passengers. The card shows that she was originally meant to be traveling on a ship called the Majestic, and for some reason the trip she originally had planned was delayed, and now she instead was assigned to the ill-fated Titanic. The eerie part is you can see the word Majestic was crossed out on her card, which then shows us the change in plans. If only people were able to see what was about to strike and they could have somehow warned her. That's the creepy thing about these coincidences. Sometimes they're just bad, You could fall out of a plane and have maggots all over you and survive, or you could go from one cursed ship to another. Number 2, Edgar Allan Poe. Okay, this is a story that actually convinced me that Edgar Allan Poe is for real a time traveler, so buckle up, grab a soda. Because 2 separate stories that he wrote both turned out to be exceptionally true and real, but not until after they'd been written. Yeah, it's a good one. Firstly, Poe's only completed novel was published in 1838, and it tells the tale of mutiny on a whaling ship lost at sea. These men on a ship realize that they're doomed and need to resort to extreme measures in order to stay alive. So they begin drawing straws to see who they're going to sacrifice to save food. A boy named Richard Parker drew the shortest straw and therefore became the next meal. Dark, let's move on. Let's fast forward to 46 years now to 1884, and in real life also, I might add. There are now 4 men who have been set adrift after the sinking of a yacht. These men found themselves in a similar predicament to the novels, and I kid you not, they ended up taking the same route and elected to sacrifice a cabin boy. A cabin boy also named Richard Parker. Odd, right? Okay. Cut to 1840, Poe penned the gruesome story The Businessman, in which the narrator suffers a traumatic head injury in his youth, and then later a violent life follows. The weird thing about this story is that Edgar Allan Poe fully understood, or so it seemed, frontal lobe injury. Now this was long before it was ever even studied or looked at, right? This type of study didn't arrive until 1848. An actual neurologist, Eric Altschuler, recently wrote how there's a dozen symptoms and he knew every single one. It's so exact and it's so weird, it's like he had a time machine. End quote. Yeah, it's almost like he had a time machine. Did he? And finally, number 1, Simpsons dome in real life. Yep, this one's gonna hit home. Let's do it. This one's gonna hit dome. That didn't work. For this one, we're looking at the Simpsons movie, which still holds up. That's a fun time. But even over the pandemic, I saw personal domes come to life, right? It was so weird. Restaurants were making these weird tents on sidewalks just to stay in business. But an even bigger idea came long before this. Back in the 70s, there were talks about putting a dome over Manhattan. This massive dome over Midtown that regulates weather and pollution, all that good stuff. Now, if that had been built, imagine what we would have done with it during the initial breakout during this pandemic. It would have been madness. And then in 2010, later on, the city called Eco City 2020 was planned out. It was supposed to be built in Siberia. It was announced in 2014 officially, this climate controlled, domed city, 4.5 square kilometers, all that good stuff. But since 2016, the project lost the funding. What do you guys think? Should we bring back domes and just, have a little personal bubble everywhere we go? Just lose the umbrella and live in a big glass ball forever over our city? I'd do it, that'd be kind of nice. It'd be like living in a Coca-Cola mist zone your entire life. Just kind of like, ooh, this is nice.